Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is Jamal Thomas. Let me make sure the vibe. Oh, that's way too high. That's way too high. Let's take it there. I'm glad you guys enjoy me today. This is a fantastic morning, or at the very least on the East Coast. It's a nice, warm evening here. Of course, a war is still taking place that the United States is directly entered into. Do not believe those people who try to make you think Israel is a rogue actor, they're fighting a war of their own, all of this stuff. Nonsense. This is a combination of policy going back to the last 20, 25 years, with the sole purpose, the main objective being to take over the Middle East, using American might to reshape the Middle East in our image, using our colony with its lust to expand into greater Israel. That is what is taking place. Mainstream media is not reporting it that way. Mainstream media doesn't explain it that way. And in doing so, they make it look as if what is taking place in Russia and Ukraine is a disparate thing and something separate and distinct from what is taking place in Iran, or for this matter, this pivot to China that the United States wants to do. All of those things are directly related to maintaining and expanding an empire and strangling a baby in the bath crib, in a baby crib, this notion of multipolarity. They don't want it. And you can understand, anytime you bring up the notion of multipolarity, they take it as a hedge against hegemony. Now, I used to point out in my other videos how insane this sounds when you say it aloud. Like, it's one thing when the United States was making this argument, the soft power argument of we're love and light, we believe in liberty. Look at Superman, he's holding an eagle. How can you not like it? You can get coffee and porn. This is great. And look at that dastardly Soviet Union that is imprisoning its people and preventing any notion of open freedom of liberties. Okay, that's not a bad argument. Make that argument. Stalin is terrifying. And if you're talking about, our big shiny grocery stores, Hollywood, all that stuff is pretty alluring if you think about it, just as human beings. I could go to a grocery store and get whatever I want. I could go to a shopping mall and get whatever I want, et cetera, et cetera. That is a pretty decent argument. And I would even go so far as to say that argument on some level one. Problem. What about today? How do you make a similar argument today? Well, you can't really make that argument today. The argument that they make is we're a hegemon. We don't believe in multipolarity. We believe that we should be the one in charge, which is not a soothing argument to other countries that don't want a hegemon, don't believe you're a rational or even a good actor, don't believe you're a force for good in the world. They think you guys are sociopaths, don't want their own notion of sovereignty in the context of their own country. The argument becomes far more tortured. The mask comes off. And what you have now is countries around the world that are aggregating around this idea of we want a new world. We want something different. We want something fundamentally different. This white world order with Europe and America effectively trying to run roughshod is not something that they all that much want. So what do you get? You get countries in Africa that pull out. You get the Sahel states that effectively push back on France, and even countries that are not part of the Sahel states, even they push back on this kind of the yoke of France. You get countries joining BRICS, many of which, if not necessarily joining directly, being its associates of BRICS. You get countries trying to hedge their bets against, let's say, one side of the world versus the other. And you get wars. And you get wars for the very sole purpose of stopping that aggregation of countries that have decided that they want something different, which is effectively the entirety of the world, minus Europe and the US. I want to go into what has been taking place and show some shots as I drink my coffee. I want to do that. But before I get into the shots, I want to make just kind of I want to answer some questions that I asked in the last video over the weekend. YouTube bastard demonetized those videos. That's okay. That's okay. Yes, I'm salty about it. It was a damn good video. Those videos got over 20,000 views. But I asked various questions in those videos. Look, this is not the channel that would make grand proclamations of there's the 50% chance that there will be a nuclear strike on. I don't do that. If I don't know, I don't say. And if I don't know, I stay in my lane. And I may pose questions if I don't necessarily have answers and give you kind of a breakdown of where things may go if I'm not entirely certain. So I posed questions on what I thought were apt, considering that the United States has entered the war and attacked Iran. Those questions, there were several, but the main ones that I think are most interesting, especially after the conversation with Morandi over the weekend, check that out, it was a damn good conversation, was one, why the theatrics? Meaning, the Trump administration was putting out a tweet that they hit 3 nuclear facilities, and they acted as if we've completely destroyed the facilities. Aren't we fantastic? And when the data started coming in, A, the people had moved the materials and themselves out of those facilities. And B, it doesn't seem like the damage was all that extensive. I mean, even if you're looking at the satellite footage, it doesn't seem like it's all that extensive. So it's like, okay, so why the dramatics? Why acting as if this kind of theatrical performance of how great you did? Now, one partial reason to that is that Donald Trump has talked himself into a corner, that he effectively said, I'm going to bomb, I'm going to bomb, I'm going to bomb. But again, you must understand from my workable point of view, the entire point was always for the U.S. to get involved. The entire point was always for the U.S. to overthrow the Iranian government. And as I pointed out on the channel, the talks were nonsense. They were. And as I pointed out, Israel was getting rocked. They were. And part of the rationale for the United States to get in after Israel was begging the U.S., oh my God, help us, help us. It became very clear that Israel couldn't carry the burden and they needed the U.S. to get directly involved into the conflict. And so my thing was, okay, well, you were always going to get in. You were always using this nuclear fig leaf as your rationale for doing this. Why not go all in? Why this tepid attack? First question. The second question boiled down to, what does Iran do? The United States has now involved itself directly into the attack. And whereas the Iranian strategy was effectively to decapitate the areas of state and in somewhat of an attrition war that would last week after week after week, something that Israel just couldn't do. If you've noticed, they tried to decapitate leadership because they can't go into a long-term war. It has to be sharp and quick, kind of like the German Nazis, right? The Nazis were very good at these sharp, quick wars. And so when they were taking over Europe, they were able to take over Europe pretty quickly. When they hit the Soviet Union, there's a reason why all of those deaths started to tick up to the tune where you got, 80% of the Nazis that died on the Eastern Front. They were not planning on a long-term war. In fact, when you go into the readings of it, the logistics were never built for this kind of long-term war, especially in regards to the level and the distance that they would have to go in the Soviet Union. They didn't care. They said, fuck it, we're still going to do it. They'll fall over. Triumph of the will. Okay, fair enough. Well, the second group of Nazis, or the second iteration, called Zionists, also as a colony of squatters that only equal about 8 million people, much less now because many of them have taken the Samsonite option. Yes, I'm stealing that from Garland. That is a funny saying. And it's effectively gone back to their actual homes as opposed to squatting in somebody else's home. I hope they leave the keys when they leave. But a country that small, that barely functions as a power and only functions as a power because the United States gives it the ability to do so, cannot get into this long attrition war for week after week after week after week, where they're bombing your energy facilities, they're bombing your ministries of interior, they're bombing one city after the next in Jerusalem, or what were the ones they hit today? What is it? Sahel or something? I'm not going to get the names right. But basically, they're hitting Tel Aviv, they're hitting Haifa, they're hitting your main economic centers. And people who have passports, because let's be honest, they're stealing somebody else's territory, can leave. Iran has nowhere else to go. That's their home. That's their country. Whereas your people are committed to the Zionist cause of stealing land, starving people, killing people, as long as they themselves can drink their cappuccinos, as long as they themselves can sunbathe and hang out on the beaches. Meaning the moment that those people are under threat and under penalty of death, they leave. How do you maintain a conflict for potentially months under that model when your economy is going to trash, when people are effectively leaving or living in bomb shelters and sewers? How do you do that? And I guess I'm pointing out, you can't. You can't. So whereas Iran can have this attrition war, a country of like 90 million people, 3 times the size of Iraq, they can absorb what you give them. You cannot absorb what they give you. I've said this on more than one occasion. I'm saying it again because it needs to be said. If we are in a trade-off between each other, you're only 8 million people, bro. We're 90 million people. Even if we take twice as much damage as we give you, you will fall. You will fall. So it matters, right? I guess I'm saying the question becomes, what does Iran do now that the U.S. has entered into the conflict? And does that strategy change? All right, first question. Why the theatrics from the Trump side? I think, if I had to guess, it has to do with the narrative that Trump went with. Meaning they're throwing this fake narrative of Iran's trying to get a bomb, and they're using that as a soothing anesthetic to the American public. They may not know any better, may not be paying attention, and ultimately don't really much care because, again, just like the Nazis in Israel, as long as there's no cost to you, you don't really care about the fact that you're killing people abroad. So this is the narrative bubble that they've wrapped themselves in. So it's kind of hard, if that's your narrative, to immediately say, we're now trying to change the government of Iran. We're now going to go on bombing sprees in Iran. Okay, that's kind of hard to do when you've told the American public for years that your issue is we don't want them to have a bomb, right? You're stuck in your bubble on some level. And so in being stuck in your bubble, they need a reason and rationale to get further ensconced into the conflict. And so we know that it would take a hell of a lot more to destroy the nuclear program. We know that. So the issue is not the nuclear program. The issue was never the nuclear program. The issue was we want to change the government of Iran. We want to use our proxy to do it. Our proxy couldn't necessarily do it. So we need to get further ensconced. How do we get further ensconced? I know we invade their sovereign territory and we bomb Iran. Iran has said we will respond to the U.S. aggression. And so we can believe that any attack that we do, whether it accomplishes the objective of trying to destroy the nuclear facilities or not, will provoke a response by Iran. That response by Iran would allow us a more organic attack against Iran that we can continue to escalate, going up an escalatory ladder. Under that model, Iran is not just hitting Israel at this point. Iran has to diversify its attention to the U.S. and Israel, something that we would prefer because on some level it would take some of the heat off of Israel, and it would allow us to get further ensconced into bombings that go beyond just nuclear sites that we didn't really care about all that much in the first place. I think that's what it boils down to. Meaning the theatrics was purely to step on an escalatory ladder. I take one step, we invite you to take a step. When you take that step, we would take another step. We invite you to take another step, and up the ladder we go. So that goes to Iran, which is why I was very interested in what Burundi was going to say on this. And I think Burundi, on some level, let the cat out the bag. Rational is effectively what Russia is doing, even though it may be unsatisfying. Iran will pump its chest. It will beat its chest like Tarzan. It will say, oh, we're going to hit you. There's going to be consequences. We are going to, you bastards, we are going to go after you and everything else. But what they know is that the U.S. wants us to step on this escalatory ladder. We do not want to give them a justification to get further involved in the conflict. Meaning it's one thing if you do it, there will be, let's say, political consequences for you doing that. But we don't want to give you a reason. We know that you want to do that. We know you want to get involved, but we don't want to give you a reason. So you can attack us. You can hit us, in which case we may respond in that case, because at that point we need to push back. But that is an unprovoked attack against us. You've already said you've destroyed all of the nuclear facilities. So why are you hitting us again under that model, right? Despite the fact they didn't destroy those things. The point that I'm making is from Iran's point of view, just like the Russians dealing with NATO, we know that you have troops in the Ukraine. We know that you are giving them weapons and everything else. We know that you're giving them intelligence to hit Russia. but we are not going to expand the scope of this war to allow you in. We're going to decimate your client. We're going to beat the devil out of your client. And when your client falls, you have nothing else here. Your mission would have failed. Meaning our success is decimating and destroying your client, not getting involved in a larger, wider war. And I suspect Iran may be thinking of this in the same way. If you notice, Morandi in that interview says something to the effect of, well, if they hit us again, he's like, well, what do you mean if they hit you again? They've already hit you once. You're involved in a war. He says, yeah, but I think the cat's out the bag on that. It's not satisfying, but it's rational. It makes sense. It's clinical logic. We do not want to create a pretext for the U.S. to get further involved in a war in a way that they can justify getting further involved in a war. And yes, I know that sounds insane because anybody who's rational, who's honest, will say, well, the U.S. had an unprovoked attack on Iran. What do you mean getting further involved in a war? But keep in mind the argument that the Trump administration is making, they are literally making the argument, weirdly enough, and Americans will accept it. Attacking a nuclear facility is not really attacking the state. It's just attacking a facility. And so Iran shouldn't respond to this. Now, they know that's nonsense. They believe people are meat with eyes. And in some cases, they are cultists and MAGA that are just meat with eyes. And they would say, hey, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes total sense. It's like, so if Iran had a bombing sortie on American nuclear power facilities, that's not an attack on America. That's an attack on the nuclear facilities because those are somehow separate and distinct from the state apparatus. Well, no, not in that situation. Oh, right. Okay. Right. It's different when it's somebody else, right? They believe people are meat with eyes. Unfortunately, there's a good percentage of people that are, and we'll buy it. The point that I'm making, though, is from Iran's point of view, they want us to step on the escalatory ladder. We're not going to do it. We're going to focus on our objective of beating the devil out of this client state. We're going to destroy your proxy. Those people who are fleeing, like literally just running into going to other countries, effectively going back home. Those things are diminishments of the state. When they blow up a building, when they blow up a location, when they blow up an apartment, okay, those are people who are not going back to that apartment, right? They're going to take their passport and go home. So Iran is sticking with status quo. They know that America may attack, and they may respond if America gets further involved in it. But that's not really what they want, per se. What they want is specific focus, which is, I suspect, what they're going to do. Specific focus. We're going to decapitate your proxy. We're going to decapitate your colony. That's what we're going to do. Now, Morandi pointed it out, saying he wanted the Zionist state to fall where it's one man, one vote. Okay. Whatever you call that. Destroy your enemy. Destroy your enemy. From the U.S. standpoint and Israeli standpoint, they're looking for a change of government. That's always been the plan. That's not shocking. Donald Trump bringing it up in a tweet isn't a shocking device. It's, of course, I've said as much. I've said as much for months. That is the objective. Wesley Clark said as much going back 20 years. That's the objective. The people who seem to be shocked by all this, I don't know what they were paying attention to. But this was always the objective. And the entire point was doing that. And you can even see in the strikes that Israel is making as opposed to what Iran is making. Iran is going after vestiges of state, power production, your ability to maintain power in your cities, your ability to function as a government. Whereas Israel is hitting hospitals, hitting education centers, et cetera, meaning they're doing something very similar as that they were doing in Gaza. They hit a police station, or at the very least a prison that was holding terrorists, political prisoners. Again, all of these things are done in order to engineer a coup. We want to overthrow the government. We want to create a failed state. That is their objective. That is their intention. That is their point. And so what Iran has to know, what China and Russia also has to know, that is the objective. They also all need to know and realize that the United States will get further involved in the war. They will come up with some of the reason, some of the rationale, some of the justification to get further involved. Because if indeed this becomes drawn out. Their proxy can't keep this up. You already see the issue with Ukraine, right? Think of all the air defense that the United States wasted in Ukraine. Okay, well, you don't have the capability of funding both. This is kind of, your queen has too many responsibilities, sir. It is a powerful piece, but you can't do both simultaneously. If one is pinned, she can't deal with the other. Or if she's protecting one, she can't deal with the other. You got to let one of those things go. And in this case, the queen has let Ukraine go in order to focus on Israel. The problem is you spent the last 3 years dumping all sorts of military equipment, hardware, and everything else into Ukraine that is no longer available to give to Israel. So when Russia says we're fighting the same enemy, they're right. You're fighting the same enemy. That enemy is funding both. The enemy can't fund both. So one has to drop away. Tsar Zelensky. I think it was Mark Sleboda. Don't mistake the mistress for the bride. Israel is the bride. This has been the plan for 20 years. And they will maintain and proceed with this plan to try to overthrow the Iranian government. So there's that. What time is it? Do we have time for coffee? Yes, we have time for coffee. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? But the time being, Trump is trapped in his narrative. But that narrative will not keep him trapped, especially if it seems as if Israel and the hits that it's taking is getting worse and worse and worse. And more people decide to leave. They will get involved. They will come up with a reason to get involved. What I think is going on is that they know the American public is against this. Meaning you're coming up with a justification and rationale using nuclear weapons. Okay. Americans are dumb enough, unfortunately, to believe that they have a right to attack another country that's sovereign and doing what they want in regards to them being sovereign. For whatever reason, they don't make the argument that the U.S. should invade Israel and take their nukes. They make the argument that the U.S. should attack a country that doesn't have nukes. And that under IAEA, is an Israeli spook or spy, or the Burley's working with the Israelis, or for that matter, even Tulsi Gabbard, before she got her mind right. All of these people have said they're not trying to get a nuke. So even the narrative of it was nonsense. But again, they framed it and structured it as if, well, if they are, then it's okay to do X. And I'm saying even the premise of it is nonsense. What I'm getting at, though, is when you make that argument, you're trapped in that argument, especially when you know that the American public is not for another war of aggression to overthrow a government, just like it was in Iraq. We played that script. The American public is against that script after it was run and after they say, hey, we spent $10 trillion for this nonsense and the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan. It's kind of hard to run that script again when the American public is seeing the outcome of it. And so you come up with another nonsense script that's very similar to it. The point that I'm making, though, is when you trap yourself into that narrative, you're stuck with it. They will come up with another, if I'm right. And that attrition warfare starts wearing on Israel that much more so. They will come up with another narrative. Now the catch becomes, are they able to potentially overthrow the Iranian government before the Israeli government fundamentally, I don't know if collapse, but definitely take attrition damage to the point where it can't function in the way that it's functioning? Meaning, how many of those people get up and leave when it becomes too much, when they get tired of living in bomb shelters and rat-infested sewers? How many leave? And does that, what does it do to this idea of Israel being a safe space, a place for Zionists where they can come and steal somebody else's home, where they can sit there and watch people get killed and starved? What does it mean for a state, for a colony, when that no longer becomes a safe place to be and there are bombs raiding constantly and you never know where they're going to hit and if you are going to be one of the people who get hit? It's one thing to drink your cappuccino as people go out and kill other people and you take their land. It's another thing when that cappuccino place get blown up or you're sitting there, there's an air raid and you're running with your cappuccino to get to a bomb shelter at the closest sewer. Those are different models. I'm saying in one model, they may just leave, which is the death of Israel. So let's go to, I want to drink some coffee. So let's go and see what has been taking place on the ground. Iran has been leveling up their strikes. In fact, these strikes have been taking place both. Israel has been doing punishing strikes against Iran, also hitting Tehran, hitting a prison, hitting, I believe it was Red Crescent, also hitting another facility, I forget the other facility, a jail. Iran has been punishing Israel, hitting facilities all across Israel, and including power centers, military bases, etc. Notice the difference in what they're targeting. This is, let's see, this is Ben Gurion Airport. Or what was parts of it. Wow. Just wow. Let's keep going. Here is, what is this? Institute for Biological Research. This is South Rishon, one of Israel's facilities. Sheriff's staff. Yep. That place no longer exists. This video is the funniest thing in the world to me. This video is the funniest thing in the world to me. Look at this, look at this. An angry Zionist. He's like, oh, somebody put up a Palestinian flag. Those bastards. I'll go and teach them a thing or two.
חיים בינינו, לא יאומן. זה פשוט היה פאקינג מוקש או משהו. אני לא מאמינה.
Let's see that again, let's see that again. Let's see that again. Let's see it again. He didn't get up.
גועל נפש.
He didn't get up.
חיים בינינו, לא יאומן.
Yeah, man, there's consequences for being hateful and racist. There are consequences for that. Oh, there are consequences for that. And just so we're very clear, yes, I'm laughing, but they're still murdering people in mass. They're still murdering people. This kid who's on the cart, trigger warning, by the way, went to get food. And of course, they've been killing people who've been trying to get food. So, you know, my reason for laughter has to do with the righteous indignation. It's not just me being an asshole. Those food places have been kill sites. So you would get a large number of people, they would go try to get food because that's supposed to be places where they get food, and they would open up fire. I showed the video of them behind a machine gun just taking down people who were effectively trying to go get food and sustenance. I've shown videos of people falling, basically starving to death as they were trying to get and carry food. They're still doing it. Israel has killed like 100 people over the course of a day. And they've been doing this for days, after day, after day. It puts you in the mind of the Nazis, right? When it was very clear the Soviets were rummaging and coming to Berlin, it's like they were in downfall. And these ovens were still baking. They were still using metals, materials, steel, all of the stuff in order for the death camps. And it's like, you don't think you should be focusing on the war? No, murdering all of these Jews was more important, apparently. Same thing here. They were getting hit day after day after day with punishing strikes in Israel, in Tel Aviv, Haifa, etc. And they're still going with the death camps, still going with the massacres, still going with the bombings. They just haven't stopped. It's amazing. It shows the level of hatred that's coming out of the fascist colonist squatters. Here is another one. These are strikes that took place, I believe, yesterday. I mean, it's daylight outside, so I'm assuming yesterday. What the fuck?
השם ישמור, איזה פחד.
מה קרה?
נפל לידי כמעט על הראש.
That guy doesn't sound happy. That guy doesn't sound happy at all. He seems deeply bothered by it. He seems deeply bothered. Let's go for another one. This is another hit that took place. I'm not sure exactly where this one is. This may be in southern Israel somewhere. Big cloud of smoke. Something was destroyed. Let's go to another one. Now, this one is in Ashdod and Ashkelon. And I believe...
راحت الكهرباء. راحت الكهرباء فجروا. راحت الكهرباء. راحت الكهرباء فجروا. راحت الكهرباء.
Let's go to the next one. I want to see that one too. Yep. Yep. Now, this is, I believe, an impact into the power facility. And this is effectively took out power, energy, lights, 3,000, 4,000 people. Koffi, give me 1 second. Give me that. Just give me 1 minute. All right, we take this one. And we take this one. Let's go to this one. This is what that looked like at a distance when the power facility went up in smoke. This is a Zionist explaining that 8,000 subscribers are without electricity in the last strike. Lord Bebo, God's work.
אנחנו נערכנו והתכוננו לאפשרות שתהיה פגיעה במתקני תשתית הקשורים לחשמל. נכון לעכשיו יש כ8,000 בתי אב מנותקים, ותוך פחות מ3 שעות נדאג להחזיר את החשמל לכולם. צוותי החירום כבר נמצאים בשטח.
It's like we're prepared for this. 8,000 people to lose their power and electricity. Are you now? Are you now? Here is a hit on the military base in, I think it's called Nevdev. Man, this is some good coffee. This coffee is fantastic. Perfect. Perfect coffee. Perfect coffee. This is some good, good coffee. Here's another shot.
Wow.
I said, wow.
Wow.
He said, wow. Wow, indeed, sir. Wow, indeed.
Wow. Nefila. Wow.
Man, I'm running out of coffee.
Wow.
I'm running out of coffee. All right, let me go to my guests. I'm sitting here being a bit of an asshole. Koffi Kouakou, my man. How you doing, Koffi? You doing okay today?
I'm doing well. Very concerned about what the world is going through in West Asia, as you know.
Yes.
We're keeping a close eye on it as much as we can, and trying to figure out. I was just saying that these are dangerous and trying times, and
that is an understatement, Koffi.
With really reckless leadership, especially in the United States, Israel, and their allies, and we have to be very careful.
Koffi, let me give you an intro first, just so people know who you are. Everybody knows who you are, but still. Koffi Kouakou, he's an African analyst, a senior research fellow at the Center for African China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Koffi, I want to back up what you're saying. As I've told my audience, we're at the precipice of disaster. And, you know, this maelstrom, this unprovoked attack, this intrusion by the United States. And let's be very honest, as I keep telling my audience, Israel is nothing without the U.S. Israel is not doing as a rogue actor. They're doing this because the goal has been to overthrow the Iranian government, to reshape the Middle East with American power, going back for 20 years or more. This goes back to Wesley Clark. And you can look at it just in the fake negotiations that were taking place with Trump. They have awoken a bear, though, in Iran. And it seems that they thought that because they could, you know, starve, kill, create their concentration camps, that they could do it with impunity, they could take down, help take down Syria, that they were like we've taken down all of these countries with the help of the US. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Sudan is a basket case as we speak. Iran is the last man standing. And they thought to themselves, this is our time.
Yeah.
And Iran, standing up for civilization, has been able to push back the beast in many respects to the point where the US felt it needed to get directly involved in the conflict. So look, I agree with you. This is very dangerous. They don't know what Russia and China are going to do in real terms. They don't know if another country is going to give Iran a nuclear bomb, or hell, give the Houthis, Ansar Allah, a nuclear bomb. They have no idea how this breaks down. There is an amount of hubris and mendacity and honestly just racism coming out of the administration in the US and out of that fascist government in Israel, that it's not looking at this through a clear lens. I keep saying racist people don't see the world clearly. So I agree with you. If you're responding to me pointing out these videos, before I go to my videos, I do make it very clear that this is going to be horrendous before it becomes unclear. And there is a certain amount of satisfaction out of watching a government that has murdered, maimed, massacred, starved for 2 years, and to watch them getting taken apart, where Tel Aviv gets hit, where their power systems get taken out, where Haifa gets destroyed. And it happens day after day after day with an ever-growing inability to do anything about it. They're satisfying to me. That may call me a horrible person. That is a satisfying thing to watch. But it's not to be taken lightly. So I take your point. I do take your point. I'm curious how South Africa sees this. I mean, if you're a member of BRICS, which is South Africa is one of the founding members of BRICS, and you're sitting back, you're seeing that some of the major countries in BRICS under attack. And they're under attack by an empire that does not want this notion of multipolarity to come into fruition. And so they try with Ukraine as a battering ram to go after the Russians. They are trying to pivot to China for God knows how long, using Taiwan as a way of doing that. And they're going after Iran, which is a fulcrum between Russia and China that is directly related to the security of both of those countries. Meaning they're trying to destroy any notion of multipolarity before it ever comes into fruition. What are your thoughts? I mean, what is South Africa thinking as it watches this?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me again, and greetings to you and your audience. As I said again, these are really dangerous times, and I really don't have good news for the end point of this. And it seems we're sort of hurtling into some kind of abyss where there will be a war, and those who started this war are going to have to pay a huge price. They will be dismantled. Their nations will take a second or third rank in the world coming up. And I think what's really happening now, before I get to South Africa, is that this conflict is now alienating the global South, and the global South now have to come out and figure out, what do we do together? Of course, they have different views, but they also have convergent views as well. But what is clear underneath all this rubbles, and then the fear and the trauma and all the horrible things we see, is obviously the emergence of a new geopolitical world, which is going to be also characterized by a new geopolitical coalition, especially that's crystallizing very slowly, not fast enough, in the global South. And South Africa is part of it. All these BRICS nations are trying to figure out where to put their hands, but by and large and overall, they're talking peace, because most of them, for some really, not strength, but natural logic, believe that peace is the best way. And then it helps to make things right. You want a just world. But what we've been seeing for the past 20 or 30 years hasn't been that, because the more you let go, the more you get attacked and destroyed. I mean, I don't have to give you the list of these countries, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Libya to Syria. I mean, the list goes on and on. But what is very clear is that this is more than a regional war. It's the tip of the iceberg. that is now telling us that it's a confrontation between multipolarism, a group of nations, especially the global south and BRICS nation, and what can also be called a residual imperial force or hegemonic group of people trying to maintain the yoke on the rest of the world, while it is clear that you have to let people breathe, you know. So coming down to South Africa is part of this global south group of nations, still looking forward to themselves finding their feet and so forth. But most important, I think South Africa wants to be on the side of peace. And then the ongoing conflict now between Israel, USA, and then Iran, and then of course, very slowly, subtly, Russia. Russia's been making very strong statement at the UN Security Council, as well as China, and then of course Pakistan on the other side also pushing. Although many of these BRICS nations, the new ones or the old one, Saudi Arabia, and of course some of the Gulf nations, they're a little bit ambivalent because they're not as powerful as possible. But South Africa is deeply destabilizing moment, not just for West Asia, but for most of us here, because the idea was that we want peace. We want a world where people don't have to fight all the time and kill people, destroy horrible, and it's just not right. And I think BRICS nations, they're not that they're confused, but their way of dealing with peace is this issue of having global peace and multipolar democracy. It's a great idea. It's a noble idea, as we say it usually, but it's not getting them there. And one of the things that you might probably like this, I used to watch many years back a small series of cartoons called Samurai Jack.
Yes.
And and there was this episode where Samurai Jack, I forget the title of the episode, but Samurai Jack was just roaming somewhere and he bumped into a whole group of a small nation. And they were just struggling. And he asked them, why can't you defend yourself? And they said to him, we are peaceful people. And they realized very quickly that peace itself was not going to solve anything. So you had to prepare and you have to defend yourself. And so in clear, South Africa is probably BRICS nations going to have to do that very quickly and say, okay, let's take it back to all those aggressors, the United States and Israel, and their allies were saying peace through strength. Let's take it back to them and then strengthen our resolve so that there will be sort of some kind of deterrent before they kill all of us. And it's very clear, and South Africa's position is quite clear. It's saying we want peace and diplomacy, but South Africa is not as strong as countries like Russia or China or perhaps Pakistan, and even other sort of outliers like North Korea. But the message is clear. As much as we want peace, we need to move forward a defensive structure globally that stops these nations that are invaders, destroyers, to really recklessly, create chaos in the world. And I think this is South Africa's position. And South Africa has also got another element, which is a moral ground. And after having taken Israel to the ICJ on genocide charges, Israel also looking at finding peace. But peace is not enough at this stage because they keep, telling at the United Security Council, we condemn this, we condemn that, but nothing happens. So the question is, what to do?
I think peace is taken at the barrel of a gun. Look, man, that sounds dark, but I'm beginning to realize how naive I was. I know that sounds horrible, but like you look at guys like Malcolm X, you look at these guys, and when you're a child, you don't quite get how they got to where they are, like why their mindset was their mindset. It's this. It's like it brings you to that mindset that okay, these people are sociopaths and monsters, and we need to defend ourselves. And regardless of BRICS' idea of the world and saying we want economic cooperation and everything else, the problem is that needs to be defended. I mean, even on Star Trek, all of these, space communists with love and light, and even they had this thing built into themselves as Section 31, And when you talk to Section 31, they talk about the rest of them like they're children. It's like, look, all of those ideas are nice. Those ideas need to be defended. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in real terms. You have countries that are paying terrorists, backing terrorists, trying to knock over governments. I mean, look at what they were doing to Burkina Faso, where, Ibrahim Traore goes to Moscow, and before he even gets back, the country is attacked by a band of terrorists. And I know that we've had this conversation. There's no belief that they're functioning on their own. There's no belief in that. If you look at Ukraine, okay, well, there's years that went into the CIA backing Ukraine, the way they were changing their education structure, even this notion of ignoring Minsk agreements 1 and 2, and given this kind of provocation of killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians, right? And now you look at Taiwan, where they're doing something very similar in Taiwan, where they're working on separatist forces, knowing full well that this is going to be a provocation for China, despite the U.S. supposedly accepting the one China policy. It's like this is consistent policy that takes place in all of these countries, that on some level, these countries will have to defend themselves if they ever want to bring in, I guess, this new notion of multipolarity into the world. I just don't know how you do that with so many different countries.
Yeah, I mean, let's look. I mean, I totally agree with you. Right now, what we're seeing is a fragmented BRICS coalition, or at least a consensus on what to do. I mean, if you take countries like India, India is very close to Israel.
Right.
India is very, very hesitant and so forth. Brazil also having closer to the same position as South Africa. Russia and China a little bit stronger because they have powerful, arms and defense system.
They can defend themselves. Right.
But now there's a shared distaste for Western unilateralism and hegemonic attacks on countries. And very slowly, in fact, I'm saying very slowly, but I suspect very quickly you will have some kind of, a consensus on how do we defend ourselves. Because I mean, the BRICS going to start, instead of condemning, and they right now, they're very little no-show, very little show about the BRICS. But I think in the coming weeks, things are going to start to change, because there's a sense that this whole thing about, okay, we're going to destroy, we don't want Iran to have, the US and Israel don't want Iran to have the nuclear, ability to sort of help itself on energy production and anything else, or even producing a nuclear, weapon. And now it's moved to regime change adventure. So this
it was
kind of
always regime change, Koffi. It was always regime change. Yeah.
There's a rising discomfort with U.S. and Israel military adventurism. It's been going on for years. I mean, how long do people, tolerate this? South Africa condemns the attacks on Iran's, nuclear site attacks as breach of international law. I mean, consistent with all the pro-Palestinian, anti-apartheid, everything that you want. But these people are still killing people. So you must really find a way to quickly rebound, because if Iran falls, as we all know, the possibility that the US and Israel will still push towards Russia or even China are really, really big. And they'll do that. But this time, this war, the war risks dismantling the fragile balance of the multipolar world. And that's the challenge that the BRICS are now facing. They must really figure out how to defend themselves. It may be a little bit difficult, but I can tell you, China and Russia will find a way to make this happen and pull the others forward. And of course, we're hearing a lot of support already coming from China and then also from Russia. They may not speak it out loud, but I think something is happening there. And Iran pounding Israel, it's just, we've never seen this before. And the trauma that they've been forcing onto the Palestinian in Gaza is now what somebody said, the Gazification of Israel is now also taking place.
Tel Aviv and Haifa. I mean, at the God, man,
Right.
I've never. It's so wild to me. Like, you are in a colony that has imparted misery at a level that is breathtaking on the local population. And you come up with all sorts of rationales for, well, there was an airplane hiding in their house, so we had to bomb their house. Or it's like, yeah, we had to get this Hamas dog catcher, so we had to kill 100 people in order to blow up the apartment to get them. And then they've bombed 90% of the hospitals in Gaza. Effectively, we're trying to make this non-functional because we want these people to leave or to die. And you get blowback at one of the hospitals in Israel, and oh, did they cry and bleed? Oh my God, I can't believe they've done this. Oh my God. Like, it's astonishing, right? And you get like all of this breathless crying on TV, and I'm sitting here drinking my coffee, just watching, like, woo.
I heard you saying that. I mean, one thing that's also hit me is that, the hypocrisy of the media. It's unbelievable.
It's astonishing.
The kind of thing they said, a few months ago about nothing about dead journalists, medical people being killed.
They didn't care.
They didn't care. And then suddenly, boom, oh no, this is something really important. But in short here, one of the things that I wanted to say that as you bring it to the BRICS, this is a huge test of credibility for the Global South institutions. And, they can't be neutral in the face of the violation of international laws with this brutality and horror. I mean, they can't keep staying there and then condemning at the UN. They must do something. And I think as much as...
Permit me to interrupt you on this one, because that is it. That point is astonishing. And maybe there's another word for fantastic. That point is that point matters. Because, the institutions, look, I have to be honest with you, I did not believe that I'd ever witnessed a genocide with my own eyes. And not like hidden in various parts of Poland or whatever, but social media every day where you're just watching it. Like I can't even play videos. I can play videos of kids being decapitated. I can play videos of parents holding their dead kids, wailing at the top of their lungs. And you see that every day, day after day. I've shown videos on this channel where people are trying to get food and Israeli soldiers with machine guns are just gunning them down like the Nazis were doing to the Jews. Like, the stuff is astonishing.
Yes.
The reason I didn't think I would ever see that is because you would think that you had had institutions, the Hague, the ICC, the UN as a general body, UN Security Council, all of these institutions that were there, they were supposed to be somewhat relatively impartial to go after and prevent stuff like that. All of those things were found to be ridiculous, ludicrous. They were just there to preserve Western power. And the moment that it became the thing that the West was the culprit, oh, they didn't have any time for it. They didn't have any time for it. I've noticed that with Democrats here in the United States, where as long as, you got third-way Democrats running the roost and being in charge, oh yeah, we're friends, we're together, we're working together. The moment that you get somebody like Sanders that is not on board for the third-way Democrats and they're going to lose power, they do everything in their power to get rid of them. Meaning the institutions were only there to preserve a power structure. God, man, this is like the Sahel states, right? It's like you have this fig leaf of democracy. And the fig leaf of democracy is there in order to preserve the power structure that is already in place and to keep it the way it is, not to allow honesty, change, what's the best interest of the public, which means, just like the South said, you had to destroy that in order to get to something else. And I think what the Global South is stuck with is we've gotten so accustomed to these institutions as being our means of making change and dealing with things around the world, that what happens when the Western world, when it becomes clear that those structures were only there to preserve the power of the West.
They're obsolete.
Yeah,
they're obsolete for a new world. And as much as South Africa goes for peace, its foreign policy is saying, oh, we're not here and they're not pro-East, no, pro-West. But I think at the heart of it is to be pro-justice, as we say. But diplomacy is dying in West Asia. In fact, it's died a long time ago. And somebody was saying that its tombstone will bear the name of those who weaponize silence. Unbelievable. And so
I love that.
So Iran itself is not just a BRICS Plus member anymore. It is now a front line in the competition and the contest for multipolar credibility. That is powerful in the sense that the Global South cannot be any more passive observer or just go to the UN and say, okay, we're drinking tea and we're talking about, oh, we're not happy. Sort of the victim groups. But they must be going beyond the observer status of great power conflict. And then, of course, take the crisis and then confirm that they have the moxie and the strength to be part of a new global architecture. And this is urgent. It's urgently needed.
Oh, that's such a good God, man. That the tombstone would bear the names of those who weaponize silence. Jesus,
Yes.
I love words. I just love the way words come together, like to give a content, like to give a it just, oh, that is fantastic. And apt, right? I mean, like we watched this play out. Like again, this is not the Soviets coming across the death camp saying, oh my God, what is this? Oh, holy hell, this is a death camp. It's us watching it. And it's like, okay, there's a superpower back in the country that's doing it, so everybody backs off. Okay, that is an indication, that is a condemnation of hegemony, right?
Yeah.
Like that's an indication that something, whatever comes up in the world after, cannot allow hegemons. It just can't. Like it's almost like watching the Roman Empire, and afterwards it was like, hey, they went too far. That's a bad idea. Or watching slavery say, hey, slavery is a bad idea. We probably shouldn't do that again.
Yeah. So there we are. I mean, some countries are paralyzed. I mean, there's some kind of paralysis anyway. But Iran, they're paralyzed, and then most of these BRICS nations, they're talking here and there, but they seem to be built to cheer on the sort of sidelines at the UN, and instead of acting to a large degree beside China and Russia, they need to be at the strategic center of this coming future. Of course, the best way to do this is balance peace and I wouldn't say war, but defense, to make sure that there's justice in the international arena, so that the most powerful ones don't abuse their powers. And I can tell you that this is a duty for everybody. Many of us who are not on the front, who are older than whatever it is to go to war, but are saying, wait a minute, what's next? What do we do? What are the possible questions we should be asking ourselves and answering, so that, well, if the United States decides one day to say, okay, we're taking over South Africa, what do we do?
Yeah. I would tell you this. I don't think the U.S. is going to take over South Africa. What I think the U.S. is trying to do is they want to weaken Iran. As I asked the question once before, why didn't the U.S. go all in when they did their strikes? And I think they're trapped in the narrative that they've created because they know that the population is not for another regime change war, as they call it. And all things being equal, they would prefer to weaken Iran because they don't want to deal with Iran at its height. Meaning, what they don't want is Iran sending hypersonic missiles at aircraft carriers, destroying the military bases in the Middle East. And by the way, Iran doesn't want that either. Like, this is not this is a worst case scenario that they know as a fat Iran could effectively effectuate. They don't want that. Iran doesn't want that. Iran will do that if the existence of the state is at risk.
I mean, Jamal, the whole world doesn't want that.
No,
the point is that you ask me a real question. What should we do from there? What is our message to the world? We're talking peace. We need to return to diplomacy. We know all these things. But while we're preparing for peace, there must be some kind of readiness for a long war, Jamal.
A security architecture.
I mean, the message is very clear. There will be a long war. And what we hear is a sort of reckless declaration of U.S. leaders. Oh, well, we need to prepare for China. We need to do this and that. We need to encircle Russia. We need to split Russia and China. I mean, for goodness sake, you have now an idea of America first. Why don't you fix home? There's so many other challenges at home. Veterans are going back home. The rate of veteran suicide in the United States is probably 10 to 15-fold. They're dying, killing themselves. And the poverty level is also big. Close to 40 million of people are struggling to feed themselves or finding a place to get that sense of quote-unquote American dream. And then suddenly a president who sold himself as a peace president comes around, flips the charts, and becomes a warmonger.
I know.
And the confusion in the U.S. is extraordinary. The MAGA people are split up. They don't even know how to, they don't even make sense anymore. You listen to Steve Bannon, of course, Bannon doesn't want a war. Tucker Carlson doesn't want a war. And then, of course, Thomas Massey's also there with Ron Paul. But also you have the other people, the most conflicting people, the J.D. Vance, the vice president, and then even the Hexet and other people, for some reasons, they just can't come out and say, look, we're going to quit this thing. I mean, look at, what's her name, National Security Head.
Tulsi Gabbard. What a disappointment. What a disappointment.
It's a huge disappointment with this women. And I just asked myself, how are human beings flipping that way? What kind of satanic energy is just running into them? It's unbelievable.
It's an American point of view. And that is very hard for some people outside of the country to understand. It is American point of view. From our point of view, we're a hegemon. We're exceptional. We can do what we want. We pay $1 trillion for military. We've demonstrated that we're willing to use it. We're sociopaths. And so when we push for something, we have objectives that we want to push for. We don't care about this other stuff short of the ability for the other people to do something about it. So yeah, we'll back Israel as it commits a genocide. Why not? Nobody's going to do anything about it. Yeah, we'll take down Iraq if we need to.
That's one of the reasons this moment's going to ask for serious clarity and courage, especially from the BRICS nations, to stand up to the hegemony, to the illegal and reckless wars that we've seen the past 30 or 40 years. Diplomacy must be used, of course, but boy, Jamal, not bomb people all the time, but peace also cannot be achieved through double standards. It must be through justice. And if the US and its allies with Israel and others are still using force, the other guys are going to have to find a way to defend themselves. And I think Iran is just doing that. Even if today Iran were to lose this war, my goodness, what a stand-up country and good people there. Large part.
Can't lose
and
this war.
I'm saying this because the kind of atrocious and horrible, trauma we've seen in Gaza, it's just unacceptable. It doesn't matter what kind of person you are. Even if you're supporting Israel, you must have that sense of humanity. I said, how do you kill so many people? And so far, we don't even know how many people have died. I mean, the Hamas figures that people are quoting around. I mean, sometimes I sit down and I say, these people have no sense of what the realities of war is. After all these buildings have been destroyed, you're telling me that only 56,000 people or 186,000 people, as the Lancet said, are dead? No, there must be at least 500,000 people dead under these rebels.
And the last one that I saw, because I think Harvard used to say 2.2 million people lived there before the war, and now they're down to 1.8 million. Okay, that's like 300,000 people just gone. And that number is astonishing. Like that is a mind-blowing thing. And then they minimize it by saying 50,000. They say, okay, I don't need your minimization. You're acting like, they're killing 100 people a day. How are you just at that 50,000 number? It makes no sense, right?
Yeah, and then when Iran sees that, it said, oh my goodness, we're going to be next. They're about 92 million people in a vast territory, 1.6 million square kilometers. Of course, it's a mountainous place. They could hide out somewhere. But the idea is that when they're looking at it, they're seeing the drones and bombing and missiles on the territory. They said, we got to do something. There is a battle of legitimacy of systems today, and the alliances are now emerging. And then, of course, we want a just global vision, Jamal. We can't just have people running around and killing the rest of people with impunity that we've seen for the past 40 years. No.
But see, that's just it, Koffi. The means at which they maintain, they know as a flat fact that if nothing changes, meaning if you just let the world play out, you let companies do their business, you let countries expand and grow, etc., they lose. In their minds, there's a primacy at stake. And if China continues their development, okay, well, think of China's industrial base. China has 1.5 billion people. Think of a country like that is fully industrialized. Okay, that is a horse that is out the barn that a country of 300 million can't touch, right? You think of Russia's military might. Russia today, the remnants of the Soviet Union and the military scientific prolific way in which they were able to build weapons and everything else, that stuff still existed. And they were able to effectively develop what is easily the best military in the world, or second best in the world. I would say the best of the way that they're fighting in this type of war. Okay, if you're the US and you are, let's say, Europe, and you see that, you think to yourself, we're losing primacy. And you add in the global South, you add in Africa, especially if Africa is taking off the yoke of Western powers, they're concerned. And so from their minds, we cannot deal with this situation even in honest terms. Like, from your point, you need honesty. You need a certain level of justice in order to have some level of peace.
Yeah.
But peace is not the point. Control, primacy is the point.
Power,
right. And so there are different objectives, right? Like, that's when I always tell my mom, human beings don't really matter in the context of global politics. And she's horrified by it. And I try to point out to her, if your objective is primacy, people can have whatever objective they want, right? There's no God above that forces you to have any particular objective. If I think goldfish are the most important things in the world, I may have a goldfish channel. I may talk about goldfish constantly. Like, why is that guy talking about goldfish constantly? That's his thing, right? Other people have notions of power. We want control. We believe that we should have primacy over the globe. And we are going to take whatever action necessary to do that. And if that means us not playing on even terms, meaning us using terrorists, using other groups, we would do that. That's just part of what it means to stay in power. Like, it's grotesque when you think about it.
I mean, but remember, these are, as I said again, dangerous times, because so far we're not quite sure what Russia and China are sitting on.
What do you mean?
They've been, let me tease it out a bit. These two countries have been building arms, all kinds of weird things happening. Every week there's some kind of thing that pops up in China about, they've managed to have, putting energy, eternal energy. I mean, all these things coming up, even weapons that we haven't seen before, that they're hiding. They're hiding out. Russia, the same thing. I mean, you've heard about the Russian, missile on Ukraine. So they are up to something, these two countries. And I can tell you, and of course, the S-400, the Russia, the S-300 modified that Russia has passed on to Iran is playing out nicely. But they have more of these stuff hiding there. So the U.S. can really have a big ego. But we've seen that it's a bruised ego already. We've seen that in Ukraine. The U.S. hasn't been able to sort of destroy Russia and Ukraine. That should tell us something. It's not just the U.S., but all these European countries, and including Israel as well, with the United States, are still struggling to defeat Russia and Ukraine. How in the world are they going to do that now with, Iran? That's a vast country, and mountainous places where things can be hidden at, maybe 500 meters down the ground, or maybe 3 or 4. It's possible. Yeah. And we've got a lot of surprises up. But one of the key things, if I wanted to summarize your question about the BRICS, is to say, let this moment, this BRICS moment, choose relevance, as we said, over rhetoric, as well as peace over paralysis, but to be more relevant in saying action over applauses, because they can't just keep condemning the US and Israel over and over and over. They must really stand up to these two nations and their allies.
Real quick, before you leave, Koffi, how should they do that, though? I mean, they've
got to support Iran. They've got to support Iran. That's the only thing they got, and they need to make it in the open. As Russian president, has been saying the past 2 days, he said, we're going to abide by a partnership, defense partnership with Iran. China is also making the same noise. And they know that if Iran fails or falls, they are next. So if they don't do anything now, I mean, it's quite a simple logic. And they're going to go after them. And so they will. That's one of the reasons I'm saying this is a long war coming up. And the U.S. might get a bloody nose, given what we already know. I mean, it's unbelievable that a country that's supposed to be the most powerful nation cannot even supply enough weapons to its ally Israel to defend itself. I mean, they gave
it all to Ukraine.
Yeah.
They spent 3 years giving it to Ukraine.
In terms of conventional war, the U.S. is weak. same as the Allies. Perhaps the only thing they've got sitting on is the atomic bombs and nuclear bombs they have sitting on. That's the only option they have. But if they use that, that will be even worse for everybody else, because the other two or three or four nations, including Russia, China, Pakistan, has already said that they will launch onto Israel. Israel does use it. And then, of course, North Korea is sort of the outlier, but North Korea is itching for action.
They are very enthusiastic. Very enthusiastic, right?
Yeah, they just can't wait. I mean, remember, the legacy trauma they've gone through with the United States in the 1948 all the way to 1953 or whatever it is, they're still sitting on it. I mean, Kim Jong-un's father and grandfather have gone through this mess. Even China as well. China really went through tough time with the United States. So they can't wait to give a solid lesson to the United States. It's not about destroying other countries, but making sure that there's peace around the world. And boy, oh boy, all of us can't wait. We may not see it in our lifetime, but they have at least some kind of peace for 50 years or half a century, or even a generation, so that nobody goes around bombing people, but get people to talk to each other, live a decent life. Of course, this looks like a dream, but realistically,
I don't think it looks like a dream. Please, I'm sorry.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm saying realistically, we need to also dream about that kind of peaceful environment, but also we need to strengthen our back so that we avoid these kind of reckless leadership around the world to destroy everybody else that's not as powerful as they are.
I know people who've been watching this channel are like, Jamal is turned into a hard ass. As opposed to this kind of Star Trek S11 light stuff. It's like even the suits get darker, right? It's not that. Look, I think human beings are environmental beings. Like they change and address according to the environment.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I don't think that's off the table as a thing that can happen. I just don't think it can happen under this model. Kind of like what you're saying. Like you can have that world where you have a peaceful generation, but you can't do it with this level of dishonesty, this level of hypocrisy. You just can't. How can I accept, like, you go and sit with someone, you claim that you're in negotiations, and your client sneak attacks them, and everybody and their mama knows you're working with your client. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that, right? How can I ever have peace? How can I even have talks with somebody under that model? Same thing with
you can't trust them. You can't trust them anymore.
Trust them. Yeah, like how does that work? You need a basic level of trust, even if you have to build it, to come to any resolution on anything. I have to, at the very least, believe that you will stick with whatever you're talking about. Otherwise, we're going to continuously end up in war. I don't think it's beyond the pale. I just don't think you can do it with a hegemon. I don't know how that works. Like the moment that one country says it's exceptional, everything else is off.
If we take clues from history, I mean, let's say modern history, either 19th century or 20th century, most of these, Napoleon or Hitler or any other sort of warmonger, they know where they are now. Something had to happen to them. And I have this sense, I'm not a prophet, no a Sangoma, as we call them in South Africa, but something is about to happen to the United States. I think one of the things that hasn't happened is that there hasn't been any bloody war since
1970s Vietnam.
70, in the U.S., the Civil War. So people don't have this sense of dreadful or bloody space in the U.S. So unless it happens on that territory, people won't think about changing their leadership. Because in fact, their leadership is now taking them into the abyss, as I said. And they're just discussing among themselves, saying, we must stop this kind of reckless leadership. And if it's not stopped, a good size of people will die in the United States. It's going to happen.
But see, Koffi, it's not just leadership, because there isn't another choice. It's not like Kamala Harris is different. Like, it's not like it's a political structure. But there is no...
What I'm saying is, exactly, but to change that system so that it produces better leadership that understand the role of what they're there for, not to go around and kill people around the world. I mean, think about just replace the United States by another country X that will do that to the United States. Would Americans accept that?
No, not under our
you.
current model of thought. No.
Yeah.
I mean, but the model of thought is the issue. It vomits up these people. Like I can give you a perfect example, and I'll let you go after this. The argument and the conversation that's taking place in the United States, it's not about, hey, why does Israel get to have nukes? Hey, why are we going into somebody else's country? Iran is a sovereign country. What the hell are we doing? The argument is, yeah, but do they really have nukes? Meaning they frame it in a way where it's like, well, if they do have nukes, then it is okay for us to go and attack another country and kill a lot of people, which is outlandish. But that is the level of conversation that takes place, meaning they frame it in this kind of American-esque way that ignores the sovereignty of other nations as if we have some kind of God-given right to go and do this nonsense. It's not just the political structure, it's the way that people think and have gotten accustomed to thinking that becomes deeply problematic. Koffi, I'm going to let you go, man. Yeah. Thank you for this conversation. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm glad to have you back. I really am. Koffi Kouakou, he is an African analyst, senior research fellow for the Center of China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Really deeply enjoyed this conversation, man. You have a good one, okay?
Thanks for having me. See you
soon.
Have a good
one. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Be safe. All right. I'm going to go from one damn good guest to another. I see him in the background, the one and only Mark Sleboda, international relations security analyst. I often say, well, I'm not going to say truth and thing, but who's a damn good analyst. I'll just say it that way. One of the best in the business. You can find him on Boosty, Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda, or you can just look under the name Mark Sleboda, the way I found him. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay today?
Tomorrow. Thanks for the shameless shill. I'm alive. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
And look, I would tell you this. I think my mom will back me up on this. I think she's probably in the chat. If I don't believe it, I'm not going to say it. There are plenty of people I bring on and says, here's this person, and we go into a conversation. So no, man, you have been one of the most accurate analysts that we've come across. And when I tell people like Richard Wolff that they've affected my workable point of view of the world, you're one of those people. And that is a valuable thing, like just how you see the world. Because it's, look, anybody can have any take that they want. Some takes are more accurate than others. And the takes that are more accurate than others are the ones that are getting closer to reality as opposed to the other ones. It's that, what I'm looking for. And so, no, you've been fantastic with it. So
just consider me your local black pill pusher.
So the U.S. has done what I expected the U.S. to do, enter the war. In real terms, look, as I've made the argument to my audience that this is about empire. None of these conflicts are disparate things, like they're not separate. The U.S. did what they can to go after this notion of multipolarity by going after Russia and Ukraine. That didn't work. They looked at Iran. They've been trying to go after Iran for the last 20-something years. When Syria fell, they had their opportunity to do so, and they took it. And they thought, I would imagine in their mind, that Israel could carry the burden on their own because Donald Trump is not that bright. And when it became clear, oh, wait, Tel Aviv is getting hit constantly. Haifa is basically a ghost town. People are fleeing in droves. We must now get involved under this nonsense of Iran's trying to build a nuke. Give me your analysis of this as a geopolitical analyst, and how do you see it? You may see this differently than I do. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I do see this a bit differently.
Please.
And we have had, I would say, following Donald Trump's quote unquote truths is, of course, I would say a better way of following the man than anything else. I mean, better than press releases. I mean, obviously, that is what he wants us to know. But I think he often inadvertently lets more reality, I don't want to say truth, more reality, more of what he's really thinking through his truths than we might get through his officials, right? Whom, Mark Rubio,
these people like violence.
I don't think anything of the man, but of course he knows how to lie better than Donald Trump.
Yes, Trump is a bad liar. I agree. Agreed.
So right after the attack on Iran, right, we have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Okay, that's entirely actually, unconfirmed, up in the air. At this point, the Iranians themselves probably still don't know the actual condition, because it will obviously take them time to burrow back underground and determine the state of these. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. There are some that say they were never in Iran airspace. I have no way of
verifying that one way or the other, right?
Of that one way or another at the moment. A full payload of bombs, big screaming capital letters. I just the words that he chooses to capitalize is, I believe, it would provide a psychologist with an endless amount of material. Books could be written. A payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site for Dow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Well, that's also debatable. Now is the time for peace. I've bombed you. Screaming capital letters. Now is the time for peace. Now, I don't think that that's so much a contradiction in Orwellianism, such as it is the simple way that business is done. That is Donald Trump's art of the deal, right? That is, you agree to what I say,
just so clear.
So you don't think and burn down your cousin's house.
So you don't think that they're trying to overthrow the government? I think this was always the plan.
I do. Okay. I do. I absolutely do. Right? His art of the deal, he's made his demands, right? Unconditional surrender.
Right.
That's what he's demanded in a previous truth. So since then, however, we have had another truth that gets to the very heart of the matter you just raised, of course. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change. In fact, just what was it, a month ago, 2 months ago, you yourself were speaking about how the era of regime change is over. People were talking about the Trump doctrine, right? Regime change is over. The U.S. has turned over a new leaf. And I was like, yeah, okay. You believe that?
Not so much.
Yeah,
Not so
okay.
much.
But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, all screaming capital letters, why wouldn't there be a regime change? 3 question marks. MAGA, make Iran great again, I suppose. 3 exclamation marks. All right, so this type of unhinged, right? Now, of course, there's 2 ways the Iranians can treat this, right? One, it's a threat of what could happen, or it's what will happen, regardless of what they do, right?
Right.
So the Iranians have a tough choice. National dignity, the national dignity of any state requires retaliation. They've just been attacked, an act of war. The U.S. was already deeply militarily involved in the Israeli attacks, but this is, actual bombs dropped by actual Americans, the actual planes, right? So
I don't think they're going to attack, Mark.
What?
I don't think they're going to hit back.
Oh, I don't think they're going to hit back either. I don't, not directly, because on the off chance, and I consider it an off chance, right, that the U.S. wouldn't continue for regime change anyway, that would be giving those in the Trump administration screaming loudly for is exactly what they want. I mean, but that's the whole point.
Right there. We are on the same mind on this. We are on the same mind. Yeah.
And where I disagree from you earlier, is you think that there was an attempt for Israel to succeed in taking out the nuclear plants, and when they couldn't finish the job, America decided to come in.
No, not the nuclear plants. I don't think this has anything to do with nuclear missiles at all.
Yeah. My good friend and colleague Brian Berletic has been trying to hammer into our collective audience's minds the 2009 Brookings plan for regime change in Iran, which path to Persia, endlessly. I mean, ad nauseum. Correctly, but ad nauseum, he has attempted. So I'm going to take up the standard here because I believe that paper exactly lays out the policies that we're seeing now, and a false attempt at diplomacy to provide diplomatic cover for the United States, and then opening up with an Israeli attack that would then allow the U.S. to be dragged into another conflict, right? Because the U.S. is always dragged into conflicts, right? Against their will, right? That is what we're seeing here, right? There is a plan, right? Now, whether Donald Trump himself has read which path to Persia and is following it is inadvertent. The U.S. deep state has long since internalized this. And when they present policy options to their commander-in-chief, everything is bent on following this playbook. I mean, and it's not just this document, of course. This document lays it out in stunningly obvious, but it is more a deeply ingrained policy towards Iran, just like there's a similar policy towards Russia, right? Most recently, this overextending Russia, the Rand paper in what was it, 2019, right? And the playbook for overextending Russia in not just Ukraine, but they're near abroad, the former Soviet states and everything. Just like there are similar policy papers for China, and a multitude of other countries that you can line up.
Right.
So yes, the whatever Iran does or not does, if they choose not to escalate, doubtless in a week or two, some combination of the Americans and Israelis will get bored or not be able to wait anymore, and they'll either create a pretext and blame Iran for it, false flag style, or they'll just go ahead and do it anyway, because who really cares at this point, right? The Western media, this right, Iranian weapons of mass destruction is the new Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. And the Western mainstream media got fully behind that 20 years ago. But now they're even more fully behind this, such that the obvious fact that there was no Iranian nuclear weapon, there was not even any Iranian nuclear weapons program, testified by the Director of National Intelligence, testified by the International Atomic Energy, but they repeat those words, nuclear bomb, again and again. The same dumb weapons of mass destruction pretext with not even the figment of Colin Powell, right, at the United Nations, right, holding up vials of cocaine or whatever the hell he was holding up, right?
It's amazing.
There's not even an attempt, a serious attempt, at presenting evidence this time. And the Western mainstream media is cheerleading it. They're salivating at the bit. They're like, finally, we've been waiting 30 years for an American president to regime change Iran. It sucks that it's Trump. It would have been better if it was Biden, but we'll get behind this. And that's going on right now. I mean, that's why they call it the fourth estate. The media is an ideological, exceptionalist, right? Pro-hegemony part of the American government. I mean, they aren't elected to office. They're not a permanent state, but they have their own sense
ideological
of
uniformity
lines, funding, by the oligarchs that run the various newspapers and media outlets and so on. They are a part of the process. And in fact, one can certainly argue that in Ukraine, they have often been the whip snapping whenever there's not enough weapons being delivered or not enough escalation going on. Why aren't you delivering this? Why aren't you delivering that? Right there, if anything, it is the media that you should have as much, if not more, contempt for as the agents of empire hegemony. I try not to use the word empire. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's accurate in its way, but I find that over the Cold War, the term imperialism has lost its cachet, its ability to punch home what a horrible force it is. And that's why I have gone to using hegemony. But you used empire before.
Yeah, I mean, either word.
That's perfectly the same thing. That's what we're talking here.
No, I agree with you. I don't think there's a disagreement in regards to what's going on. Please continue. I'm sorry.
Iran is damn whatever they do, most likely, right? If they restrain themselves, right, out of hopes that the U.S. will not immediately escalate the regime change. The U.S. almost certainly will anyway, or Israel will create the pretext for them to do so. But that doesn't mean that they should jump into that abyss and attack the U.S. directly anyway, right? There are options, right, for some type of face-saving retaliation at this point. One, do nothing, and likely the same things will happen. They could fire missiles, drones at one of the unoccupied U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria, because the U.S. has evacuated several bases in both countries in the run-up to this attack, right? Clearly signaling to anyone who was paying attention that that's what they were going to do. Donald Trump, once again, nonsense about 2 weeks and all of that. It's some pathetic attempt at lulling the Iranians once again into a false sense of having time. They could interfere with the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, now that's their nuclear option. Now, there's been all sorts of reports in the alt media, in the social media, the alt media, over the last 24 hours that the mining of the Strait of Hormuz has begun. I have seen no evidence to that regard.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't have any evidence of that.
I've
seen radio signals. I've seen jamming.
Yes, that's another thing that we've seen. We've seen arguments that there's heavy electronic warfare jamming of the GPS signals, which is creating chaos and confusion between thousands of ships moving in and out that rely on it for navigation. But I haven't seen any confirmation of that either. Right. So they're not impossible, but I would think you would have seen something about that right now. Anyway, that's of course an option. A third option is to have their quote unquote proxies, right, the axis of resistance, strike back against the U.S. for them, right? Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq. I did see a single mortar was fired onto an American military base in the past 24 hours. I'm not sure that quite arises to the level of retaliation for bombing with B-2 Spirit bombers. Right? The problem with the others is, right, the Houthis, they're in it. They're still flinging an occasional missile in the direction of Israel, but they've been badly mauled. They survived, which, to their credit, the U.S. threw up their hands and said it's not worth it. It's not worth the cost. And, Trump declared victory and they sailed away. But their ability to significantly attack either Israel or the United States is limited. Let's be clear about that. Hezbollah, the same thing. They were mauled badly. I mean, you can see all the pieces falling into place leading up to the attack in Iran. Each member of the axis of resistance was dealt with, right? Hezbollah's in bad state. They survived, but their leadership was decapitated terribly, exposing all sorts of holes and moles and Mossad within their organization. Hamas is still fighting for their survival in increasingly genocidal starvation siege of Gaza. And Syria is gone. I mean, it's Al-Qaeda-stan now, baby. It's the literal Islamic State reborn. So that was the essential piece, right? There goes all of Syria's Russian-provided and Russian air defense systems that were absolute. Clearing that was essential to clearing the way. In fact, it was just about 6 months from the overthrow of the government in Syria and its literal takeover by ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Giuliani was both, and the then Israeli bombing of whatever air defense was left and not transferred by Turkey to Ukraine, whatever. I mean, that is what has sustained the Kiev regime over the last few months. Is the U.S. Well, Turkey did it, but with U.S. I'm sure provoking and providing money and the like. All of the Russian military equipment, right? Russian, Soviet, whatever was there that had been given to Syria over the years, leading right up to, well, this last year, Russia now had to fight again because it was provided to the Kiev regime in Ukraine.
Can I stop you there for 1 second?
Yeah.
Isn't this an indication that appeasement doesn't work and that all things being equal, they should have opened all hell on Israel when Syria was still in existence, when Iran was intact, meaning they watch as one device of the resistance got decapitated after the next, as if that monster wasn't rummaging the countryside, eventually going to knock on their door.
Yeah, I'm not so sure appeasement against Israel. That might have been too close for the U.S., right? And Israel only ever played a bit role in what happened in Syria. The big appeasement was with Erdogan, right? That was the fatal.
Oh, you Idlib.
Yeah, the trusting of Erdogan with the Astana agreement and letting them in Idlib and letting. I believe that was the biggest flaw. I don't necessarily think that it would have been smart for Russia to go after Israel. I don't think there's any. Yeah,
I'm not saying Russia. Yeah. I'm saying Iran watched, meaning there was.
Iran, yeah, as well. Yeah, they watched Iran, decapitate Hezbollah and did nothing. And now when Hezbollah doesn't stir as Iran is being bombed, I mean, well, there's a reason for that. One, they lack the capability now. Two, exactly. Why would they? I mean, did Israel step up for Hezbollah? No, they didn't. I mean, the axis of resistance is a two-way street. I mean, they may still get into this, but I mean, it raises a lot of questions. And Pezeshkian, man, Picard, epic double facepalm, right? I mean, because Putin last week revealed to us at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum something that I was completely unaware of, that the recent strategic partnership that Russia and Iran had signed had no military defense clauses whatsoever. It was entirely economic and political.
I brought this up to you. That Dugin said this.
He did. Right. I remembered that. And when Putin said that, I'm like, I had a conversation with someone this week, and they asked me about Dugin saying this, and I said I didn't think it was likely, and I didn't, right? And I didn't think that Dugin had any specific knowledge, but Putin further spilled the beans directly himself, so there's no denying it now, and I was wrong. I mean, undoubtedly wrong. And
I was mystified by that.
Wrongness is in obviously overestimating the Iranian government.
What the hell are they thinking? I got to be honest with you. I was mystified by that. When Putin said that, my mouth hit the floor like, oh, what is wrong with you?
So first, Russia offered them a mutual defense pact, similar to what they have just signed with North Korea. And they said, thanks, but no thanks.
Yep.
And then Russia said, well, or we could cooperate on air defense. We could help build you an air defense and electronic warfare, interconnected, multi-layered defense system like we have. We could even do production in Iran, and you could be hooked up to our own air defense radar networks, right? I mean, and Iran said, thanks, but no thanks. And evidently, according to, I haven't heard any denials from Iran at this point. I'm not sure it's their priority denying things like this at this point, of course. But again, what was put out was that they hoped, naive as F, to placate and improve relations with the West. And evidently Pezeshkian was elected as a moderate, as a reformist, on a policy of wanting to improve relations with the West. So they feared that Russia, already involved in a war with NATO de facto in Ukraine, that any alignment with Russia would ruin their non-existent chances for improving relations with the West.
He can't be that naive.
They held off on it. They said, no, we're okay. No, you're not okay. And if they had signed a mutual defense pact with Russia, that would unofficially put Russia's nuclear as well as conventional umbrella over Iran, and Israel would have never dared strike. Right,
Mark,
there.
This explains why Putin was so annoyed at that conference. Yeah. And when they were asking him, your responsibility to Iran, he was like, effectively, what do you want me to do?
Oh yeah. It's the same feeling I had with what happened in Syria. Like, we were fighting, we were ready to go, we were sending more, and their military just was co-opted and bought out and threw down their weapons and ran away, and we couldn't fight the war entirely for them, right? I mean, that was the same feeling of frustration, that everything in the Middle East is built on sand, right? That just washes away.
How is he that naive?
Said that he specifically said that Iran was difficult to help, difficult to be friends with. And now, of course, the Iranian foreign minister today is in Moscow meeting with Putin personally. But
please help me.
I had thought that over the last 6 months, Russia was already beginning the work of building. I mean, everyone believed that, right? This is the first time that we have heard that they weren't. We were all under the assumption. It might have taken a long time, but we believed it. And no, there was nothing. So now, the statements from Peskov about, so far that we've heard from the meetings is it all depends on what the Iranians want, what they ask for. And Putin also said that up till now, like in the last week plus of the war, they still haven't asked for anything from Russia. Now,
Mark,
do we then believe that they're getting something from China? I don't believe that either, because Russia would, be more, I believe, politically willing to, provide arms or intelligence or something in that regard. So, and Putin and Xi Jinping had an hour-and-a-half conversation about what was happening in Iran last week. So Russia and China are coordinating, but Iran hasn't coordinated, certainly with Russia, over the last week plus, since this attack began. And Russia's like, and I continually hear and have to deal with people online who are doubtless justified and outraged, right, over what is happening to Iran, but then trying to shift the blame onto Russia. Why isn't Putin doing this? Putin is, a female's genital part, right? He doesn't, he never wants to fight, right? And everything. And what do you expect of the man? I mean, he offered them the world, right, in this particular situation, and they said no. We think we can. We think we can do a deal with Trump. I'm like, are you mad? And this fatal conceit. You cannot. I mean, the supreme leader of Iran said it, not in the last 6 months, that diplomacy with the United States is pointless, right? That it will never achieve anything. And yet that they walked back into that. And twice.
Well, the supreme leader is not the supreme leader.
Well, I mean, he's certainly not a total dictator. That is, I mean, the reality is, of course, that no one in the Western media is that Iran has an extremely complicated political system with it really, you have to sit down in poli-sci classes to understand the system of checks and balances and competing factions that the Iranian government has, within their political system. It's a little, it takes some effort to map it out. I mean, it's complicated. It is not a mullah dictatorship by the supreme leader's will, whatever anyone in the Western, media wants to portray it as. And once again, I mean, they're a prickly nation. They have, justifiably, they have a millennia of existence, laid out in their history. And yes, the previous iterations of the, the Romanov Empire, the Soviet Union have had sore spots in relations with Iran. I mean, everyone has history, but no, that's not entirely true, because Russia had agreed to transfer air defense systems to Iran a decade ago, and Medvedev became president in Russia. And that was one of the phases where Russia was trying to ingratiate itself in the West. And they withheld those air defense systems for years before they finally transferred them. That was in the, around 2010. That was a period. So maybe there's a reason why you can't blame them in even recent history, with current leadership at different levels being involved then as well. But the lesson that everyone should take home, whether you're Iran here or whether you're Russia with past mistakes that may have helped prejudice Iran here, you can't do diplomacy. You can't appease the beast. The hegemon will come for you when you're prepared or when you're unprepared. They will come. Nothing will avert them from that. That their goal is power, right? Global power. And any independent sovereign country that doesn't kowtow and bandwagon with that hegemony will and is targeted.
My rage in this moment is off the scale. My rage in this moment is off the scale.
And Pezeshkian, from everything that has happened since, first of all, I completely do not now believe at all that Raisi's death was a tragic helicopter accident. Let's make that clear. Everything that Pezeshkian had, I'm sorry to my Iranian friends, most of you actually probably agree with me anyway, but Pezeshkian has been the biggest disaster for Iran if he's the one who has taken the lead on these decisions.
He has.
Decisions not to escalate back against attacks on Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis that occurred while the whole axis of resistance, what the 2 volleys of attacks that Israel made earlier this year, the refusal to sign a mutual defense treaty with Russia. God knows what was offered by China, right? That they're not being as open about at this point. But, it's more than likely that there was something there as well. Pezeshkian has been the biggest disaster for this country. And that fatal belief that you could appease the beast, that you could, it takes a complete debasement of your national sovereignty and your way of looking at the world to be accepted as a vassal of the U.S. hegemon. And all you have to do is look at the current slate of European political leaders who hate Trump to a bone, but bow and lick his posterior at every opportunity. That level of debasement is what is required.
I don't understand how you could be that naive. Like that is a startling level of naivety. Like you sit there and you watch them take out Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. You watch them go after Syria. I mean, like literally for years go after Syria. They take down Lebanon. They're killing people in mass. And you sit there and watch that and you're like, we can make a deal. It's like, what the hell is wrong?
I guess it's the boiling frog, right? That you just it's happening incrementally, piece by piece, and the specter of conflict with the United States is Syria. The U.S. is still right. They're not unrivaled, but it's.
I get it, but the monster is rummaging through the city. Like it's almost as if you had a city somewhere, and the monster is rummaging through the countryside, and you can see the trees fall as the monster goes through, and you sit in there thinking to yourself, "Nah, I'm okay." It's that.
He's still on my neighbor's. He's on my neighbor's house.
Yeah,
he won't come this way.
I'll be okay. I can make a deal with him. That is infuriating. The notion that Russia is like, you don't have a nuke, and Russia's saying, we'll give you, you'll be under a nuclear shield. We'll have a security partnership.
Well, that wasn't said, but it's right ever,
implied.
Right? People wouldn't say that. But I mean, obviously, if there's a mutual defense pact and Russia has nuclear weapons, even if it's not explicitly said, which I believe it wouldn't be, there is an unofficial extension there, obviously, over it. And Medvedev, the new Zhirinovsky, the new firebrand, he specifically in a very long, detailed tweet said that there are multiple countries willing to transfer nuclear weapons to Iran at this point. Now,
that they won't accept.
Okay. Well, he didn't say that.
I'm saying Iran is saying they won't accept it.
Yeah. Okay. So I do now there's a lot of bluster and bluff and hot air that comes off of Medvedev, right? A lot of it is simply meant to be morale building, the voice of the common Russian in this regard. Not that Medvedev has ever been the common Russian, but whatever. I appreciate some of his sentiments, right? Even if I take them with a grain of salt. But this is one of those things that I don't think would be an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I think that is perfectly serious. Whether he's talking Pakistan, whether he's talking North Korea, or whether he's talking Russia, right? There's always he doesn't specify which countries, right? He specifically brings it up. And maybe not. I mean, I don't think Putin would do that, to be perfectly honest. But maybe there are people within the Kremlin who are like, John Mearsheimer himself has argued that the single greatest stabilizing factor that could stabilize the Middle East is to provide Iran with a nuclear weapon to even out Israel's possession of the nuclear weapons, which of course is against international law and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but the West, maintains this collective fiction for decades that they don't have. Well, they don't say they don't have them. No one will ever talk about it. I mean, no, it's this game. So yeah, I'm frustrated. I'm exasperated. I agree with you. I mean, the Russian government has never been faultless. I've criticized them many times over the last decade, as I'm sure you're well aware. But I mean, you got to put the onus here on the Iranian government, right? And if it's Pezeshkian and them closer to him, then that man is the biggest disaster for this country. I mean, the Western media loves bringing up the specter of the appeasement of Nazi Germany, right? In World War II. Everything is World War II. Anytime you talk to an opponent, it's the appeasement of Nazi Germany in 1938 all over again. But
Pezeshkian is that guy. He's
Pezeshkian is that guy. Pezeshkian is. I'm afraid he is. I mean, I don't know 100%, but everything that I've heard is that Pezeshkian, and I'm sure it's not just him, right? I'm sure there is a political faction within the Iranian government, within the Iranian oligarchy, within the Iranian religious establishment that thought this. And right now, this son of the last dictator Shah that the U.S. installed in Iran that led to the Islamic Revolution, right? He's parading himself. He's come out of his abode in the United States, in New York, and this morning he was in Paris, telling the Ayatollah Khomeini that if he surrendered, he would be given a free trial, and saying outright that regime change is now. I mean, that creature. I mean, like, the last thing that Iranians need or want, whether is another monarch installed by the son of the last dictator installed by the U.S. and Iran, U.S. and the U.K. We can't forget the fading British Empire's role in that particular horror show in Iran, the toppling of the Mossadegh government, the democratically elected socialist government of Iran, that led to this whole decades-long, right up to the conflagration we're in now.
Mark, I have to be honest with you. It's taken me a bit to kind of digest this.
I've just been kind of like, well, what now? I mean, like,
because you're right. People were screaming at Putin, like, "Oh my God, what are you going to do?" And they're screaming at China, "Oh my God, what are you going to do? You're going to let the government fall?" Yeah. And people like me, and even up to Sarah Bills for DT Geopolitics, and we're like, there's a level of, I'm not going to say freaked out, but we live here, so we have a clear understanding. Okay, these people are sociopaths, and you're dealing with sociopaths. They don't care about this notion of diplomacy. What diplomacy have you seen take place through the Middle East? They've murdered all of these people. Think of the number of people they killed. Why are you in a glass vase? You're not. You are and will be destroyed. They will turn you into a failed state. We get it. And so the common sense for us is, well, obviously you need to work with Russia and China. All of them are in a similar situation. So we assumed that this collaboration was effectively taking place. And then you hear Putin effectively say, look, man, we tried to offer them help. They didn't want it, which is a blow to us, like saying, okay, maybe Iran has something under their sleeve for their. No, they don't. And this conversation brings it down to they believe that they can negotiate with monsters. And you think yourself, how are they this radically naive? And that is a blow.
I heard the tail end of your good conversation with Koffi before I came on, and I heard you talking about how, I mean, this is a clear violation of international law, of the UN Charter, of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, how they have no right to do this. They have no right to decide who, the government of Iran is. Well,
I just don't believe international law exists.
It's pointless because we live in a brutal, realist, cynical world where might makes right.
To be clear, Mark, that wasn't my argument to Kofi. My argument to Kofi was that stuff doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Those
exist.
things were power structures under just to maintain power for Europe and America, not in reality. That something needs to come into fruition that replaces that, because
it's a fiction that is agreed upon and actually enacted when it's convenient for everyone to do so, and when it's not, it's just a fig leaf hiding the brutal reality of the world of international relations. And Trump screaming in childish all capital letters about regime change in Iran and killing the leader of Iran, the Ayatollah. That is the world we live in, right? That is the unparalleled. And the one thing that Trump does is make that a lot more obvious than other U.S. administrations. I mean, the crassness is its own burden to bear, of course, but he just does what previous administrations put a much more PR controlled face on, Biden, Obama, and others. So
no,
this
is
the unparalleled.
My argument to Kofi was that stuff doesn't exist.
That
it just doesn't exist, and that any notion of peace is going to have to be taken at the barrel of a gun. And I think that's true in Ukraine. I think that would be true in Iran. And this idea because what we were talking about was BRICS, that the goal seems to be to strangle it in the crib. And that whether it's going after Russia or whether it's going after Iran or whether it's this pivot to China, that they believe that taking out these things would effectively destroy any notion of multipolarity coming into fruition.
They thought they were going to take out Russia, right? They thought Russia was the weak link that they were going to take out. I mean, that was the Biden administration plan in 2022, provoke Russia and we'll take care of them and then pivot to China. Well, that didn't work out so well. Now they're like, well, Iran looks a bit weaker right now, so we'll back off the Russia stuff and go after Iran. And that's what they're doing. And Iran is absolutely essential to China's One Belt, One Road, right? Their vision of economically linking Eurasia. And that a pro-US installed dictator in Iran would be a significant strategic threat to Russia's quote-unquote soft underbelly in the Caucasus and in Caspian.
What do you think Aragachi is talking to Putin about? Because Putin says, God, man, this is bringing so much more context to me. This is elucidating so much and is doing it in real time, which is screwing with me in regards to my questions. All right, so that explains a lot. It explains why Putin was annoyed when they kept saying, what are you doing for Iran? It explains when Putin pointed out, look, they didn't want our help. We asked them 3 times. They didn't want our help. It explains the meeting that Putin is having with Aragachi, where Putin says, okay, let's see how we can get you out of this situation. And Aragachi looked into the camera and had this look like this mother, this MF. But he had this look of kind of like, what do you mean getting us out of this situation? Well, from Putin's point of view, you put yourself in this situation. You did this. We asked you over and over again to let us help you because we understood that you were a vital part of this multipolarity, and you decided you wanted to go bare-chested and go alone.
Hey, and now, this straw house you built, it doesn't look so solid. It doesn't. We could add a brick foundation here. No, the wolf and I are good friends. Don't worry about it.
Right.
I don't need that.
Right. And so now you're here with the U.S. having just attacked you.
But there's much
in the middle of a war.
Russia can do now. Russia can't build an air defense network. Even overnight. 6 months, right, wasn't enough time. But they could have started, right? You can't train people to operate Russia's air defense systems now, right? I mean, that's like the U.S. handing off weapons to the Kiev regime and expecting them to use them properly on the battlefield, right?
F-16s are a good example. Yeah.
And does that mean, Russia at this point is not going to send troops to Iran. They're still engaged in an existential conflict with Iran. We could hope that China will step up right? I mean, obviously, Russia and China are cooperating. We can hope that China will step up at this point to protect what it is an absolutely essential, piece of not just the multipolar world, right? I mean, Russia-China foundation, right? But Iran is the next building block, right? The next essential building block onto there. Right. That everything else will be, is in BRICS plus and so on. Is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is tagged on as, multi-vector institutions of multipolarity. But
protect them how is the question.
Yeah. That's,
and what is Aragachi asking Putin for?
I'm sure they're discussing, first of all, what do you want? And then how realistically can we help you? I mean, God, Mark, I'm sure they're talking more than just militarily, of course, but I mean, they can't avoid talking about the military needs right now as well. I mean, Iran's in a bad place. They're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't right now. And I mean, I just cannot believe that the U.S. is going to back off now.
Of course not.
I
never believed that they were going to back off. This is 20 years in the making. Like, this is the culmination of the crisis point that they wanted.
The question then going forward is, what is the plan for regime change? Because bombing Tehran and other Iranian cities, whether by Israel or Israel and the U.S. alone, is not enough. Right? The government isn't just going to magically go away. So what is the network of Mossad connected terrorists, mercenaries, separatists, the Baluchi separatists, the Azeri separatists, the U.S.'s Mujahideen Khalq rabid dog that's still chilling on the chain in Albania, right? What is their plan to unleash? Maybe they don't have a plan. Maybe they don't. And neocons often don't think these things through, but they have options at the very least. Because that is, yes, the missile strikes, U.S. bombings of Iranian cities will help set the stage. They'll help weaken political, social, economic, foundations of the state, and provide room for something within to strike. Because no one, even in the West, is yet talking about putting U.S. troops on the ground in Iran. That doesn't seem like it. I mean, at some point, I'm sure Lindsey Graham will start screaming about it eventually. But if things aren't going their way, but right now it is going to be the covert regime change. And remember how the Syrian government fell. Remember how the Libyan government fell. At the end of the day, Libya was resisting all of this European bombing. And when the Americans joined in, they were still doing it until the covert operations with Qatari backing went in on the ground, and they co-opted the commander of the defense of Tripoli to just stand down and open the gates of the city, right? That is what happened there. In Iraq, right, in 2003. Once again, the majority of the Iraqi army was compromised and co-opted and bought out and stood down. It is only a small portion of the Iraqi military that actually fought when the Americans went in on the ground, right? Because there was that month-long bombing campaign and U.S. intelligence. So always they seek to rot the house from within, and then it just needs a push to fall it over. So what is their covert, unconventional warfare plan for regime change in Iran? Because that is the real threat, not all the tomahawks and massive ordnance penetrators dropped on a country the size of Iran with 90 million people. It is the regime change operations that are launched from within that are the real threat. And hopefully they can, Putin and the Ragchi and the Chinese and whoever can sit down and figure out what those are and how they can be stopped.
I guess that explains why Putin was like, all right, let's see if we can get you out of this.
Yeah, I mean, you're
basically you're deep shit, and I'm trying to help you out.
The military acronym, FUBAR, take prominent. F up beyond all recognition. It's in a bad place, and I know people in the alt media have been crowing and with every Iranian missile that's falling on Israel, and I feel it, right? I feel a bit of schadenfreude, but I think there's too many people exaggerating the damage that Iran is doing and downplaying the damage that is being done to Iran right now.
As somebody who plays those videos, I would say, look, I think from my point of view, if this is a war of attrition, where one side is attacking, basically, if Iran and Israel are exchanging,
if it was just going to be a long-range strike war of attrition against Israel, but it's already not that now.
Right. The U.S. is now involved. The U.S. will get further involved.
And if the U.S. is involved, the U.K. is involved.
Right.
And France is involved. And other governments in the Middle East, right? There's a lot of Arab governments appear to be trying to sit on the fence, but
I don't believe them.
Jordan, it's certainly involved. And I don't believe Turkey for a freaking second, no matter what kind of domestic statements that Erdogan is playing out, right? He can talk smack about Israel every time he wants, but he has done nothing, less than nothing. He's behind the scenes. He's fully in bed. He's a member of NATO. And it was a fatal mistake for Russia and Iran to ever trust him in Syria. I said so in 2019?
Yeah. You ended up being right. It's just shocking to me. The more I hear about this stuff, the more shocking it gets. Look, I agree with you. The internal divisions is the thing that they seem to be going after with all of these Mossad agents. It's almost like their security.
That's why they're bombing today. Look at the Iranian or the Israeli airstrikes. They're all on Tehran. That is regime change setting the stage. That is weakening the government in Tehran, not to force them to give up nuclear enrichment, but for regime change.
Last question. Why do you think that Iran doesn't respond in kind? Like, meaning they would hit Tel Aviv, but these are the Dimona nuclear facility still up. They said they had plans of where they knew where the Israelis were keeping their thing. Meaning, why don't they turn that place to glass? They seem to be very restrained, and I don't quite get that. Considering
you sound like my dad does that.
What? Oh, he thinks the same.
No, well, I know he would talk more about the U.S. gleefully they would turn that country into a glass parking lot and all those ragheads, right? I mean, that's not.
I'm an American. This is what we think.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not on the same political spectrum as my father, thank God. But anyway, so two things come to mind, right? The first one is Iran has real limitations, right? They are not as weak as Israel and others tried to present them, but neither are they strong enough, right, to
inflict their will,
wipe out Israel with long-range strikes. Let's just put it that way. Two, a fear of escalation with the United States. There's always that fear. And at the end of the day, they don't even, right? That's where we're at now, right? But let's say it stayed just about Israel, right? And the U.S. really didn't get involved. That they actually had an America first, foreign policy, as it was. Some people tried to present them as having,
right. And
the U.S. said, "Oh, not our war. We're not getting involved." If Iran hurt Israel bad enough, like replying in kind, hitting the Dimona nuclear plant, and creating some type of nuclear Chernobyl situation there, then Israel would just hit back with nuclear weapons.
Then Iran shouldn't be in this fight.
Yeah, they did. It's not their choice. They did not choose this fight. They've tried not to have this fight, but They're on the chopping block.
I get that, but Israel can make that line anywhere. Meaning they could say, well, we don't like you hitting us, so if you hit this, we're going to go to nukes.
Yes,
like meaning God,
that's
man,
why
I
it's
do
so
not
dangerous.
get
Israel having nukes. Yes,
I don't get the thinking of Iranian government. I swear to God, I don't. It makes no sense to me. Everybody, whether it was me, you, Brian, other people out there pointing out the U.S. is a group of sociopaths. They're obviously trying to reshape the Middle East with American power, using their proxy to do it, every bit as much as they're using Ukraine or Taiwan as a proxy. Why are you being left to your own devices? And you find out.
I want to close out talking about the smartest man in the room.
Mark Sleboda?
No, by far. Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
He develops a strategic deterrent of nuclear weapons. He maintains and extends a powerful conventional military. He creates economic and military alliances with Russia that extend Russia's protection against the United States. North Korea is more economically, politically, and strategically stable today than it ever has been. Right? Since the Korean War.
Yeah.
I mean, since it ever has been. Right? And he did that by having, yes, you know, he was happy to flirt with Trump, but he never was lulled into any false sense of vulnerability by him. Today, no one in the United States talks about regime changing or even striking North Korea. They built the type of deterrent, strategic, nuclear, meaning militarily and diplomatically, politically, and provided the economic foundation, getting themselves out of economic isolation with Russia. That was needed. If Iran 6 months ago had followed that same course of interconnection, look at the multipolar world countries are all targeted. And unless they create real military alliances, real economic and military linkages with each other, then they will be pulled apart and picked off.
That was my conversation with Koffi. That was the same thing we said in the conversation. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty. At Real Politics with Mark Sleboda, or if you put in his name, the man is brilliant, and he knows his stuff. Mark, thank you.
Obviously, Koffi does too, because you guys were just rehashing the same thing.
Well, yeah, that was kind of an argument. Like the BRICS nations are being picked off. Don't they realize that you need a military? Like basically, peace is taken at the barrel of a gun. It's not just because you're, peaceful.
And to be fair, not all the BRICS is often talked about. I mean, a lot of the BRICS nations really don't want conflict with the India, Brazil, the foremost of the bunch, but even Qatar hosts U.S. bases. UAE hosts U.S. bases. Saudi Arabia still. Are we in BRICS? Are we not? Dancing on the fence.
It's not that simple. There's divisions.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
Mark,
we talk about BRICS, but it's not BRICS. It's not what you think it is.
Thank you, Mark. You be safe, man. You have a good one, okay? All right. I want to go from one damn good guest to another damn good guest. We're joined with Daniel McAdams. Daniel McAdams, wow. Institute for Ron Paul, Peace and Prosperity, Executive Director. I know this at the top of my head at this point. Executive Director for the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. You can find them at ronpaulinstitute.org. Daniel, my man, how you doing this morning? You doing okay?
Good morning, Jamal. How are you?
I am doing okay. A morbid conversation with Mark Sleboda, but that's okay. I'm going to boost myself up for this. I have this. Is MAGA dead? I think MAGA is dead. I think Donald Trump killed it. And there seems to be some people who are more cultists who are trying to wrap their head around, well, we have to get into a war, and the neocons want us to be against Trump as he goes into a neocon war, but we need to stand beside him because he's a man of peace. And it's like the stuff that they're saying is so outlandish. But you get some people like Tucker Carlson, you get some people like Thomas Massey, who Donald Trump just attacked remorselessly, Marjorie Taylor Greene, like true believers, who say, well, wait a minute, this is not what we voted for. We voted for somebody who's going to stop spending all of this money on these wars, who's going to keep us out of these wars. And yet here we are with the president following a continuity of U.S. policy going back to the last 20 years. It was bait and switch. Is MAGA dead?
Well, I mean, you're right. They've just renamed it. Wasn't it J.D. Vance who said, well, President Trump invented America first, so he gets to define what it means. You know, it's bizarre to see people turning themselves into pretzels. But, it's reminiscent of, 22 or so years ago when the U.S. went into Iraq. It was the same kind of thing. Well, I'm all for peace, and we're seeing the same kind of thing happen now. But, what President Trump has done in starting a war with Iran is 1,000 times worse than what George W. Bush did in Iraq. I mean, Iran is a much different country. I hesitate, but ultimately, Mark is probably right that it's a losing proposition for Iran because the U.S. can continue to bring things to the table that Iran just simply can't. Nevertheless, this is a much larger animal that the U.S. is trying to slay, and it will take a lot more hits. So this is George W. Bush on steroids, and it's certainly killed the spirit of MAGA, if there ever was one, besides a sloganeering.
To be fair, it's not so much that I don't want to speak for Mark. It's not that in a one-on-one competition that the belief is that you can take Iran down with military, like in the sense of strikes and those type of things. The belief is that there's a playbook. It seems like Iran is made of Swiss cheese in a security sense. And so you have all of these, like, for example, many of the strikes that were taking place were internal. It was like drones and trucks and all of this other stuff where drones were going to start blowing stuff up. And so it was a huge Mossad network that was inside of Iran. And the catch becomes, okay, well, how much of that has been taken down? How much of that still exists? And the strikes that are taking place seem to be meant to make that much more alive, to make it more vibrant, to give more of an opportunity for that to come into fruition. Now, we don't know if that's the case. Like, we don't know if there's a game plan behind any of the stuff. But looking at Syria or Iraq or Libya, where it seems like there was internal divisions that was able to help bring down the government from internally, that the fear is that something like that is taking place with Iran, because let's be honest, the airstrikes is not going to be enough to do it. And if it's a one-on-one competition between Iran versus Israel, okay, well, one is a country of 80, 90 million people. The other one is a country of 8 million people. One can absorb a hell of a lot more than the other one. So I think the fear has to do with this notion of, will the Iranian government and the people stand strong as a solidarity fashion that prevents any kind of internal divisions that may try to bring it down internally, because strikes by themselves are not going to be enough. But we don't know. It's an open question. And we're finding out that Iran was not necessarily working with Russia and China in the way that good sense would indicate. It's just bizarre. That's just utterly bizarre. I want to show you something. This is Vice President J.D. Vance, the guy who's supposed to be the quote-unquote moderate minute, or at the very least the mouthpiece. And he's trying to explain to MAGA why attacking Iran is right and okay. And it's like the level of contempt that he has for his own population is breathtaking.
I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long drawn thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back. We're going to now work to permanently dismantle that nuclear program over the coming years. And that is what the president has set out to do.
J.D. Vance is lying through his teeth on so many levels. For one, setting the nuclear program back, Donald Trump acted as if he destroyed all of the nuclear programs. That's not true. Two, we're going to do this over the course of years.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean? The diminishment of the state over time, meaning we're going to chip away at it. The truth of the matter is they're trying to overthrow the government now. They're not talking about doing this over the course of years. It's nonsense. But give me your take on that. He's trying to effectively come up with a new George Bush strategy for supposedly MAGA that is interested in America first as opposed to running policy abroad.
You're right. Everything he said is a lie, and they've completely destroyed America's credibility. I honestly didn't think I would live to see us having zero credibility. So when he says one thing, we can expect the other. When Trump says, "Well, I'll make a decision in 2 weeks," and he hit it within 24 hours, there's just no credibility. There's no one to talk to in the U.S. It's like they've gone mad. Everyone who did it before is dumb, but President Trump is super smart. He's a Superman. I think they're going to have a hard time convincing most Americans, if that's the case, who have not drank completely the Kool-Aid. There are a lot of people who sort of held their noses and voted for Trump, saying, well, at least we won't get into new wars because look what Biden did. And that's a lot of people out there. He didn't. The landslide wasn't really so much a landslide if you look at the actual number of votes that he got. But I just wanted to remark on one part about Iran. Now, I think you may be right that it was a mistake, but they've always heavily emphasized self-reliance. I think that's one of the reasons they didn't want to get involved with military alliances with Russia and China. In retrospect, it might not have been the best choice for them to do, but they wanted to go it alone, to build up their own resources. But, as you said earlier, it is a death by 1,000 cuts, and that's what they did to Gaddafi as well. With Gaddafi, there was years of NGOs and all of this sort of thing going on. You can't really do that as easily in Iran. But I think you're absolutely right. The airstrikes tend to unite the people. And so it has the opposite effect. But when you can destroy from within these 1,000 cuts, you create this sense of uncertainty in people. That's the last thing they want. That's the thing that upsets them the most. And then you start making promises. Well, because we've seen it everywhere. There's been a color revolution, and you try to get the young people on board. Well, a great life awaits you guys. You don't have to live in this uncertainty. You don't have to worry about whether you're going to get blown up in a cafe. All you have to do is to, go along with this, and it's very successful. It's only, as far as I know, it's only failed a couple of times. One of them was in Belarus, I think, in 2018, and in Georgia, actually last year, it failed. But it's got a pretty good track record of succeeding.
Daniel, there's something going on with the audio. It's scratchy. It's something. I can't necessarily put my finger on it. They're saying feedback. I don't know if it's feedback. It could be.
Okay, is that better? I have a microphone right here.
No, you're fine. Okay, let's run with this.
Okay.
Let's run with it. Look, I agree with you. Tulsi Gabbard is a big disappointment. There's that. We will see if the Iranian government can withstand effectively all of NATO countries and Israel combined, because that's effectively what we're looking at. Aragachi is in Moscow now, which is a bit rich. And I'm a guy, man. I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just saying, I'm not saying this out of a horrible place. If it sounds like I'm being brutal to Iran right now, it's just after the conversation with Mark, there were certain things that we thought was taking place. One, we thought that S-400s was being transferred into Iran. Two, we thought that there was a relationship that was taking place between Iran and China over the course of, let's say, several months, if not years. And three, we thought that I knew Pezeshkian was a weak leader. That was understood. We knew he was naive. That was understood. But this, and if indeed these choices are being made by him, oh man, talk about a dereliction of duty. I mean, it's almost like contempt for his own state, for the choices that are effectively being made when it was clear that the monster was rummaging through the forest. You can see the trees drop. Like if you ever watch Lord of the Rings, and it's like you see falling over, like the monsters are coming through. city or coming through the hilltops, and you know they're walking to your hill, and it's like, all right, the monster is coming to my door, but I can negotiate with the monster. It's a monster. What are you talking about? And to make this even worse, like you get these kind of weird arguments like JD Vance of, or Marco Rubio, we attacked their nuclear facilities, but we're not really attacking the state. We just attacked the nuclear facilities.
This isn't war. It's just a war on their nuclear plants. I wonder what either of them would say if a foreign country bombed our nuclear reactors. Would they say, "Oh, that wasn't just war; they were just bombing our reactors"? I mean, we were ready to go to war with Russia over false claims that they interfered with our elections. We called that an attack, a war, an attack on the United States. So it's there's clearly a double standard there. A lot of people criticize President Putin for being incredibly naive. That may be the case because certainly when they've devoured Iran, you know where they're going next. They're not going to be satiated. They weren't satiated with Iraq. They weren't satiated with Afghanistan. It just whets their appetite. So Xi and Putin should think pretty hard about this. I don't expect them to get involved directly. I don't think that's in their nature. But they should hopefully have a clear and sober look at what's going on.
Daniel, I agree with you. I guess I'll start where I began. Is this the death of MAGA? Or I'll go further. Did MAGA ever exist? Was it always a joke, a lie, just something electronic? Obama got an award for running one of the best campaign advertisements. They effectively said this was one of the best packaged advertisements that has taken place in the political space, of having this notion of Obama, Omenum, Obama on a magazine with his halo around his head. He croons, he plays basketball. It's like they were able to package him in this way that made him seem larger than a political figure. No drama, Obama. And then he gets in office, he's like every other politician. Right?
War.
Yeah, more war, drone king, deporting migrants, all this stuff. Is Trump just the Republican version of hope and change?
Well, I mean, he may well turn out to be worse than Obama. And Obama was terrible, but don't forget, Obama did a couple of good things. I mean, Obama negotiated the JCPOA away with Iran. Obama normalized relations with Cuba. So it intermixed between a lot of bad things. Obama did a few decent things. I don't see Trump in foreign policy doing a single decent thing. Maybe if he inadvertently undermines NATO and destroys that will be a benefit to the United States. But it's not because he has any sense of morality about it. It's just because he has contempt for European leaders. So that would be sort of an accidental benefit to the United States. But the war machine is now the war machine and foreign lobby is in control of the United States government. People are being put into a mental prison until it's freedom. It is a totalitarian state that you've become.
Daniel, this is a dark day. The country is at war once again, and they've used the same weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Oh, I know, weapons of mass destruction in Iran. And it seems like it's gotten even more dumbed down. It's not like you don't have this huge push like Colin Powell going to the UN, showing the vial of pink, supposedly uranium, yellow cake uranium. You don't have this whole let's try the diplomacy thing where the vestiges of the State Department were working on diplomacy and all of this other stuff. This was far more weirder and shallow. I mean, you had Tulsi Gabbard, even his own government coming out saying, yeah, this is not the case. You get IAEA, this is not the case. Meaning they had nothing. And yet the media still accepted the weird framing of, well, do they have it or don't they? If they do, somehow this justifies us going in and killing a lot of people in somebody else's country. It's just weird framing.
Well, I mean, just sorry to interrupt. I mean, the U.S. has just gone full Israel. It's like, F you. We don't care. We don't have to justify anything. F you. We'll kill you. That's what Israel's been doing in the Middle East for years now. And that's the policy that the U.S. has adopted. And I think because a lot of the United States government is infiltrated, people like Ratcliffe are acting as agents of foreign countries. So we've adopted that F you mentality. F you, will kill you. And that's not what America was about.
Well, they pointed out that Ratcliffe had no intelligence of his own short of what he got from Israel in order to effectively justify.
Yeah, and that was the New York Times. That was the pro-war publications put it out there. So that's what we've become now. That's what happens. You lie down with dogs, and you wake up with fleas, and that's what's happened. We've got a bunch of fleas.
I'm going to close on this one. So this is State Department spokesman Tammy Bruce. Listen to what she says here. This is outrageous. Like, this is so outrageous. And the idea that you have elements of MAGA that think this is okay is mind-blowing to me.
The pride of being able to be here and do work that facilitates making things better for people. And in the greatest country on earth, next to Israel.
Think about that. She's a spokesman for the U.S. government, the USFNA. And she is sitting out here saying, Israel is the greatest country on earth. How is this not anti-American? I find all this stuff to be anti-American.
Yeah, and the more Americans push back, and they are pushing back if you look at the polls, the negative view of Israel is at an all-time record high in the United States. The more Americans push back, the more the U.S. government will crack down. And that's what they're doing now, cracking down on speech, cracking down on ruining people's lives who don't buy into it. And it's going to get a hell of a lot worse.
Wow. Daniel, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate you joining me. I always appreciate your point of view. You and Ron Paul. Ron Paul has been, I would say, proven right, especially on issues of foreign policy. All the way through, he's been consistent, something that I appreciate. There are very few consistent people, Massey, Rand Paul, very few consistent people in Congress. Dane McAdams, he is the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. You can learn more about Daniel's work at the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity by going to ronpaulinstitute.org. Daniel, when is your next show with Ron Paul? You guys have these periodically. I see them when they come up.
Yeah, we do it every day, actually, Monday through Friday. Friday is the economics day, and I'm not on that show, but Monday through Friday at noon, for the moment at least, we're live on Rumble, the Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Very cool. You have a fantastic day, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. I got to be honest with you. I'm trying to absorb the conversation I had with Mark. I'm trying to absorb it. In complete transparency, because, I try to be honest with my audience about my takes. And Aries moon, I can have emotional takes and then kind of settle back. My rage at that government, meaning Iranian government, is breathtaking right now. It is breathtaking. It goes so deep in this moment. It feels like, have you ever had a kid? And I'm not comparing Iran to kid. I'm not doing that. I'm trying to give it is very hard to articulate how people feel. You can only do it through imagery that you impart. So this is the way I'm trying to impart it. You have a kid that, let's say, is in a difficult neighborhood. Let's say a difficult neighborhood. You want the best for that kid. You want the best for that kid. You're not their parent. You may be a friend. You may know them. And you know that they are in a difficult situation. You know it as a flat fact. You know it like gravity. You know it like, like lungs knows air. You know it. You get it in real terms. And in wanting the best for that kid, you think to yourself, all right, there's a level of personal responsibility that is inherent to being a person. It's just there. Got to brush your teeth. Got to put on deodorant. Got to, wash your clothes. Got to pay rent. These are things that are just kind of part and parcel of being a person in our current existence. And you find out that they weren't doing something. I don't know what it is. Maybe they weren't getting a medical checkup. Maybe you find out they had a heart issue and they weren't necessarily seeing about it. Maybe you find out they had cancer and they weren't necessarily going to the doctor's visits. Whatever that thing is that's existential, you care about them and you find that they're not doing the basic things to maintain their own integrity. That is deeply aggravating. Because from an external point of view, where you're looking at it, you're thinking to yourself, there's a monster at the gate. There's a monster at the gate. He has blood in his mouth. He's trying to feed on you. It's clear as day. Why do you think you're special? Iraq has been taken down. Afghanistan has been taken down. Syria has been taken down. Libya has been taken down. They've been killing people in Lebanon. They've been murdering people en masse in Gaza and in the West Bank. Why do you think you're special? Why? Explain that to me. And they're like, we're going to be buddies with that monster. We're going to make amends with that monster. We're going to do what all of these other governments couldn't do with that monster. And it's like, why do you think you can do that? Why do you think you can do that? And then with all of these vestiges of quote unquote the resistance get taken down, you just watch. You just watch. Hezbollah gets decapitated. You just watch. Syria goes down. You just watch. And I'm not saying they weren't necessarily involved or it would help Syria. I'm pointing out that even having the, God damn it, man, the conversation with Kavort even makes more sense now, where they were like, hey, Syria, you should go and fight Israel. Are you going to help us? Nah, we're just standing to watch. All of your devices that you set up as resistance gets taken out. And there doesn't seem to be a relationship of give and take. It's just you let them get taken down. Russia and China, on some level, depend on Iran to maintain its integrity. And when Russia is saying, hey, we're in a global world, and in the context of that global world, we would like to have a security relationship with you in the same way we're having in North Korea, because in honest terms, the integrity of your state matters greatly to the integrity of our state. We are interrelated in some respects, not, a one-to-one. It's not like Russia goes up in smoke if Iran doesn't exist, but obviously in the same way that Syria damaged Russia's capability in the Middle East, Iran will do that even more so. Let's have a security agreement. Nah, we're all right. Let us transfer S-400s. Nah, we're all right. We're okay. We're good. We're okay. We're going to make agreements with America. That's what we're going to do. We're going to shake hands with Israel. We're going to figure this out. That is a level of delusion that is so breathtaking that that person that is that naive shouldn't be anywhere near government. Breathtaking naivety. I said this once before in a video when it came out that Pezeshkian believed America when America said, hey, don't respond to Israel. We're going to make a deal in order to, end the war in Gaza. And Pezeshkian said, okay. America told us this, so obviously it's true. Fast forward 6-7 months later, we were lied to. Really? You were lied to. Tell me more about that. Yes, I'm being derisive. I'm not being derisive out of a negative place. I'm being derisive because I'm fucking annoyed. How are you living in this world where you are literally trying to create something new, whether you know it or not? Meaning, the moment that you decided to be a part of BRICS, you had a target on you. Full stop. You had a target on you before that. Your very existence was a target on you. How do you not know that? I hope you get my point. Europe has no issue being in an association with America, which has no issue being in association with Israel. All of them are working in tandem. You're one entity, one entity. All of them are working in tandem. And all of them are working in tandem to end your existence. And you're like, we'll figure it out. We're okay. We don't want to get involved in your global politics. You're already fucking involved in global politics. It's not your choice, bro. Meaning your very existence is the problem that they are trying to resolve. If you don't know that, that is breathtakingly naive. That is the point that I'm making. And the fact that you're going to Russia now, while you're in the middle of a war, where they are literally trying to destroy your state. This has never been about nukes, as I keep pointing out. This is about the integrity of the Iranian state. And you now go to Putin, and he says, let's try to figure out how to get you out of this. Look at his face when he says that, because this is now explaining a lot of shit that didn't entirely make sense when we were initially watching all of this unfold. Aragachi's expression when Putin says, let's try to figure out how to get you out of this, and he kind of looks at the camera in this very strange way. God, I thought I had that video still up. My point is, everybody is screaming at, oh my God, what is Putin going to do? Oh my God, what is Putin going to do? How's Russia not getting involved? How's Russia not getting involved? What the fuck do you expect them to do? Invade a sovereign state that apparently didn't want assistance or help from anybody? It's aggravating. It's aggravating to me, hearing that. You want to go it alone. And now that you've decided to go it alone, and your places are being bombed, and your people are being killed, now you don't want to go it alone. Now you want help. My point, this is a breathtaking lack of foresight, is what I'm getting at. There's a monster strolling the countryside. It goes from house to house. It knocks on the door and it eats the person that answers. And when they don't answer, it knocks the place down and kills everyone and eats the babies. And when it finishes, it goes to the next house in the countryside. And as you sit in your castle knowing that you're the last house, you watch one house gets burned from your castle that's on a hill. You can see it. You can see a fire. And then it moves to the next one, and there's a fire at another spot on the map on the countryside. You can see it. And there's another one. And it's obvious that its path is getting closer and closer to you. Chess logic says that this is a temporal issue, that we have a certain amount of space and a certain amount of time, but those things are temporal advantages. And the temporal advantage is that it had to get through all of these other things before it could actually get to you. And so you, knowing that, because you're looking at the world in these global terms, you're looking at the world in the moment to which you find yourself, where there's a failing hegemon that is doing everything in his power to keep control. And you just so happen to be one of the spokes in the wheel, whether you want to or not, is irrelevant. Your very existence and identity as a state is a problem for that hegemon, just like the other places as it continues to go rummaging through the countryside. You get a larger global force that has one of the best militaries on the planet, that is the best air defense on the planet, that has demonstrated their capability by effectively decimating Ukraine. And they offer you a military partnership that is also associated with Iran, and with a wink and a nod, probably also associated with China. And they say, hey, we are fulcrum on this notion of multipolarity. We need to work together because they are coming to get us. and you say, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing, which fundamentally ignores A, the multipolarity, B, that you're a target, C, that you can't do your own thing up against something like all of Europe and Israel combined, where they have no restraints, they have no limits, and they have nukes. And you've decided, for again, what is a dereliction of country or duty to country? We don't want nukes. So you've allowed yourself to be perpetually vulnerable in the face of sociopaths that don't care about your moral restraints, that don't care about following international law, that looks at you as a target, weak link in undercutting and subverting multipolarity. That is the source of my rage. It is this inability of foresight and naivety to believe that A, we can do our own thing in a world that is global in the way that people aggregate together, and that we can make amends with the monsters that have murdered hundreds of thousands of human beings in the most horrific ways. And even if you want to say, well, we're trying to negotiate with America, not Israel, they're the same fucking thing. One doesn't exist without the other. And I'm saying Israel does not exist without America pumping 70 or 80% into that genocide. Any deal that you make with America is effectively making a deal with a genocidal state, because it is America that allows that state to be genocidal. They murdered Soleimani while he was going out to make peace. What of that state that did that did you believe you could trust and make a deal with? That's the part that is mystifying to me. This was not about nukes. It was never about nukes. Did the government really believe that it was isolated to nukes? And that having a nuclear umbrella, because you don't have nukes and they do, was vital to your own security interests? Would Israel have even attacked if they had a security agreement with Russia? Yes, I'm angry. I'm sorry. I'm angry. It's just, it is not in my interest to see the Iranian state destroyed. And so you would think that they would have a certain level of due diligence themselves in preserving their state. I'm pissed. That's all. Let's go to chat. You may just, and by the way, you can disagree with me all you want on it. That's fine. This is not me kicking the victim. At least that's not what I'm trying to do. Obviously, we have no right to attack that government. Obviously, Israel has no right to attack Iran. Full stop. But this is not about rights. Rights don't exist. They don't. Just like governments don't exist. Those things are made by agreements. And your rights end the moment that a power says they do, unless you have the ability to defend them. So no, this is not me kicking the victim. I'm pointing out that in this case, the victim needed a bit more due diligence in a hostile world where, international law doesn't exist. The IAEA is never going to give you a fair shake because of the way that it's structured. The United Nations is not a body that can actually affect anything without the agreement of monsters and sociopaths that are part of that international body. I hope you get what I'm saying here. Yes, Iran is the victim. But it seems like that victim did no due diligence in any of these processes to ensure the integrity of their state or to give their state the best chance of success in a world that depended and depends on the maintenance of that state. Iran may win this, but there is no God above that discerns that it needs to win it or that it must or will win it. The integrity of that state could end. Once before they put a Shah in, it could collapse. So I hope you get my point. This is where this level of angst is coming from. It's not coming from a place of bad faith. It's coming from a place of wanting the maintenance and integrity of that state to continue, and not a failed state like Libya where they were selling black slaves. Look, this is the stuff that they do when they get their way. I don't want them to get their way. I want them to lose every bit as much as I want them to lose in Ukraine. Meaning, I want the hegemon to fail miserably in brimming, bright, vibrant, and clear ways. I want the state of Israel to be taken apart. And I want Iran to have the ability to do it, considering they were the ones that were attacked. It would have helped a hell of a great deal if they had layered air defense to avoid some of the attacks that are hitting Tehran right now. It would have helped a hell of a great deal if they had a partnership with Russia in regards to security. Those things would have helped immensely. We believe that those things were taking place, and it comes to find out they're not. Not because Russia didn't want to, but because Iran wanted to go it alone against monsters. You guys can disagree with me. You can take the piss out of me. Feel free. Pink Rose, do you think Israel is causing the same amount of damage to Gaza or less because of being defeated? They're causing the same amount. They're increasing the amount of attacks and murders that they were doing before. I suspect a lot of that had to do with them being angry that they couldn't affect their will on Iran, and Iran was able to effectively affect their will on them. Mark may have a point about the attacks on Iran or not having the bang for the buck that they want. I partially disagree with him on it. Israel is not a big country. It's a country of 8 million people, and it's not used to living in bomb shelters, getting hit over and over and over and over again, and seeing those people flee in a 1-to-1 matchup where one country is a country of 8 million that is dwindling, and another country of 90 million. One country has passports for somewhere else where they can effectively go. You blow up their house, they're leaving. Or for that matter, you're getting people fleeing in droves in and of itself because they don't necessarily want to die for the cause of Zionism. They would prefer to, be there, drink their lattes as they commit genocide. Well, these are two different factors. If this is a one-on-one, which Iran wants to maintain and just focus on Israel, I think Israel loses. I think they lose badly. I don't think Israel can absorb anywhere near the damage that Iran could absorb. But that is not what we're talking about, right? The U.S. will find some other rationale or reason to get further involved, which will provoke and force Iran to have to deal with the United States and Israel with an escalatory ladder that gets forced. Because, again, just because you don't want to fight doesn't mean that I can't provoke you into a fight by punching you in the face. How many punches in the face do you take before you put up your guard and throw a punch, right? So this notion of, well, they can just not respond. No, it doesn't work that way, which is, again, part of my angst. This idea of, well, we don't want to be aligned. Your very existence is the issue with the hegemon. It doesn't matter what you want. Look, as my audience knows, I have to get treatments. My kidneys don't work. That doesn't stop me from traveling. That doesn't stop me from taking risks. That doesn't stop me from traveling and gallivanting the world when I get the opportunity to do so. None of those things adversely affected me. Will mattered in this case. However, I am still stuck with physical matter, reality, limitations, that if I push those limits too far, I will suffer as a result. It is not about my wants. It's not about my wants. It is about requirements, things that are necessary that you have to deal with and manage. Because if you don't manage them, they will manage you. It is not about wants. It's not about your dreams. It's not about your aspirations. It's not about, I want to grow wings and fly to the moon. It's not about that. There are real realities of state that you're stuck with. It's not about hopium. You're living in a hostile world. Oh, for fuck's sake, I'm sorry. Let's go through these chats. I'm deeply annoyed. That's all. Taharka. America and Israel together cannot defeat Iran. I disagree with you. No, don't misunderstand me. Iran has the capability of putting a knife and making it hurt for both Israel and America. Israel has nukes. The US has nukes. Iran has poor leadership. So you are starting this from a fundamental disadvantage. What I think Iran is trying to assume is that Israel would not use those nukes if the attacks only go but so far. I disagree with Iran on this. And the reason I disagree with them is because, for one, you're dealing with maniacs. Two, if the integrity of the state is at risk, not just everybody dies. That doesn't mean the integrity of Zionism. If that is at risk, they may resort to nukes. Now, the catch, and maybe the specter of, if you do that, other countries will get involved and you may get nuked for using those nukes. But is that enough of a hedge against the use of nuclear weapons by Israel if and when it gets militarily defeated? I don't have an answer for that. And the reality of it is, America is involved and would prefer to continue escalation in it to diminish the Iranian state. I don't think the United States wants to have this immediate existential struggle from the standpoint of Iran where it feels like it's in a corner and needs to just let loose. Where it says, fuck it. The state is under threat militarily, and we would destroy anything in our midst with our hypersonic missiles and everything else, and we cut loose. Okay, I don't think the US wants that. I think what they want is a creeping, nipping away at the government where it gets weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where it can eventually be pushed over in the sense of a coup. So who knows how many Mossad agents on our, yes, I'm getting deeply cynical right now because from my point of view, there are certain things of state that you're just stuck with, especially looking at this in a global sense where you have predatory countries of the West who are trying to destroy you. To me, that was clear. And I thought that was clear to Iran, which is why me and I guess other people kind of assumed that they knew that and was responding accordingly to that. And part of responding accordingly is you're working with people who agree with you. You're working with allies, people who are in the same box, same container. Doesn't seem to be the case. My point is there's no God above that demands Iran win, just like there's no God above that demands the US and Israel win. It's a contest. Adrian Dittman, thank you for your hard work, bringing the best news and analysts out there. Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate that, man. I do, honestly. I really do. I try. Food must get to Gaza only. Agreed. Question is how? Question is how? The reality of it is they've been starving Gaza for years, not just this several months. They've stepped up the starvation campaign with the notion of getting them to come to certain areas where they can murder them in mass, which they've been doing hundreds per day. Gaza is going to have to suffer until Israel breaks. Iran has taken the mantle of trying to do just that. But Iran is at a fundamental disadvantage because Iran doesn't want nukes. Israel has nukes. They have no such moral qualms in using them. We'll see what happens. But agree, food needs to get to Gaza. Taharka. God, I don't know why I have such trouble with this name. Taharka. Because of Christianity, most Africans support Israel. Well, I wasn't aware that God was okay with the genocide. I wasn't aware of that. Look, man, I don't care about your beliefs and mysticism. I just don't. That is not an excuse. It's not. What you do is what matters. If you're murdering a lot of people, starving them, raping on camera, finding horrific ways to mock as you go about murdering hundreds of thousands of people. That doesn't seem godly to me. And you would hope that people have a mind and they're just not meat sacks with Swiss cheese for brains, that they would say, hey, that doesn't seem to be the most religious thing in the world to starve people to death. Hey, it doesn't seem to be the most religious thing in the world to kill people by the hundreds of thousands. If your God commends that, fair enough. But that is a weird, warped, fucked up God that is okay with it. You should care about what people do, not what people say. If a minister is claiming to be a godly man and he's fucking every parishioner that's there in a short skirt, then maybe he's not that godly. And pretending that he is self-delusion. I don't have time for that in this way. I don't care what their beliefs are. I care what happens in real terms. Flying board. The problem is that Iran's president, Pezeshkian, he is weak and naive. Is there a chance that Iranian parliament impeach him? Probably not. Not in the middle of a war, no. Not in the middle of a war. I mean, I don't know if they see it in these terms. Like, are they watching when Putin points out, well, they didn't want our help? Are they watching when Putin says, look, we tried to offer missile defense systems, they didn't want those either. They didn't want a security partnership. They didn't want those things. They wanted to go it alone. Are they seeing that? Are they seeing Putin get annoyed when people keep saying, what is Russia going to do? What is Russia going to do? It's like, dude, they're a sovereign country. Can't fucking invade them. Like, meaning, I don't know if they're seeing what we're seeing. And I don't know if they're thinking about this in the terms that we're thinking about this. We think about this as a global conflict. We think about this as empire or hegemony, trying to maintain a weak power system. They may be looking at this purely as issues of state. And we can make a deal. We can make agreements. We made the JCPOA. Dude. We're beyond the JCPOA. They're not for that. And even if you're trying to make a deal with the United States, your ability to be strong helps you in that deal, as opposed to being a weak target. Rest in peace, Iran, because of Pezeshkian. Get rid of him, impeach this Western agent. Pezeshkian reminds me so much of Gorbachev. No, he does not. He does not. I would defend Gorbachev on this. He does not. Pezeshkian reminds me of Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain, appeasement process with Hitler. We'll give him Czechoslovakia. That's all he wants. He said, you'll stop there. And Hitler goes back and said, these people are weak. These people are weak. Gorbachev was a visionary. There's a difference. I don't think he was weak. I think he wanted something fundamentally different for his country. Pezeshkian is trying to make a deal with monsters. You could say Gorbachev was trying to make a deal with monsters. Okay, fair enough, maybe. But he wasn't doing it from a position of weakness. He had a vision for a different political system in a different world. Pezeshkian is not looking at this stuff in a global sense, at least not really. He's looking at it in this naive hopium of being able to get back to a JCPOA where all of the sanctions are removed. Okay, good luck. Obviously, it didn't work that way. Do panic. Taharka. Iran paid Russia $400. It was never delivered. For 400, it was never delivered. Okay, I don't know what that relates to. What do you mean, for some kind of missile weapon systems? I mean, look, I would tell you, there are Chinese analysts that point out the same thing that Mark said, that Pezeshkian, that they were using anti-Americanism almost as a tool while simultaneously trying to get closer to the West, and that the deals and agreements that China was trying to make with Iran did follow through. There's other analysts out there that are saying something very similar to this. This is not a singular thing. When Kavort is saying that Iran told Syria, hey, go and fight, but we're not going to back you up. There's a repetitiveness that is coming through here. And by the way, all of these are people that want to see Iran succeed. So it's not out of malicious intent or will. It's not in blaming the victim. It's trying to point out that they've made poor choices. All of us as human beings make poor choices, right? But when you're in this kind of Game of Thrones, it matters more. Just matters more. Malt Lax X. Would the decision for Iran have been different if Raisi was still alive? That's what everyone says. The new president seemed to be too naive. That's what everyone says. They said Raisi would have never done this shit. They put it at Pezeshkian's feet for blame, which is why all of these people believe that Raisi was assassinated and that the Iranian government doesn't want to own up to it because they would have had to act if he was. Flying Boar, Pezeshkian had no loyalty to Iran because he was an agent. I don't know if he's an agent. I just think he's naive. I mean, look, if you're running the country to be given benefit of the doubt, you don't want to get into a war. Like, you want to deal with economic concerns. You want to move forward with those economic concerns. The last thing you want to do is end up with a fight with the United States or, for that matter, Israel. And so you can convince yourself, well, we can try to make a deal. We can try to deal with it. We can try to. But people who were there longer and were more experienced would have said, you can't negotiate with the U.S. in the way that you're trying to do so. You could look at what took place in Russia with the Minsk agreements. You can look at what took place with what these deals were with Gaza. Like, hell, you can look at what took place with Soleimani. You can look at what took place with the JCPOA. There was a litany of experiences that should have gave him a certain impression, but apparently he was so full of hope and appeasement that he just sat there and boiled. It's frustrating. Connor G, thank you, Connor G. President Jafar, I feel Iran is being undermined from inner leadership. Somehow their strategy makes no sense. Agreed. I mean, I know we're Monday morning quarterbacking, but again, this stuff isn't coming from a bad place. There was a monster at your gate. God, man, I know I keep saying that, but it's true. There was a vampire at your gates. You could see him coming a mile away. They put it in policy papers, for fuck's sake. It's not like they were quiet about it. There was a monster at your gates. The monster played on a megaphone, speaker system, what they wanted to do. And you're like, nah, let it play out. We'll let it play out. Dana, Jamal is Masoud Pezeshkian, U.S. asset. I'm suspicious. No, I don't think he's an asset. Dana, thank you. No, I don't think he's an asset. I think he's naive. I think he's radically naive. I think in his mind, because dealing with war is it's so over the top. Like, meaning nobody wants to make life and death decisions if they don't have to. Meaning, I don't want to have to make a choice to kill you, especially if I'm a moral, ethical, reasonable person, right? Nor do I want you making choices to kill me. And so what you don't want is to embroil your country into a war, especially if you don't know the outcome of that war. It was existential. The problem with this thinking is that you believe it's your choice. It's that. It's not your choice. It's the choice of the person who's thrusting that war upon you because they believe they have an advantage and they can take you down. If you go with an appeasement strategy, thinking that if I lick enough ass, the West will leave me alone, when all of the policy documents said that's not the case, when policy going all the way back to the George Bush administration, George Bush Jr. administration was to take down Iran. Do you know, John Kouakou has sat here on the show and was talking about how when they decided to go into Iraq, that Dick Cheney was saying within several weeks, we'll be in Iran. Iran was always the point. How does he not know that? How are you head of a state and not know that? Just because they elect somebody who's a moderate doesn't mean that you're so moderate you let your government get taken down or you put it in a position where it's radically, ridiculously weak. And yes, a lot of this blame is falling on Pezeshkian. Supreme leader, Ayatollah, and I'm emphasizing supreme leader because apparently that's not really the case. Apparently, it is more democratic than we give it credit for, or that they give it credit for in the West, where the government has a lot more control over the affairs of state, even military affairs. Yeah. Dana, no, I don't think he's an agent. I just think he's naive, and that ultimately he wanted to avoid a war. And it just so happens that everything that these people try to avoid are thrust upon them anyway, with them being in a weaker spot. So no. Connor G. Iranians thought only Allah would protect them in the same way blacks in the United States are brainwashed that their oppressors, pale-faced Jesus, will protect them. Allah and a lot of missiles. Honestly, I have a huge missile compliment. I don't think black folks think a pale-faced Jesus is going to protect them. I think a religion is anesthetizing to the masses. And I think ultimately blacks just wanted to be part of the country. That's all. Like I don't think there's any magic to it. On all Lewis, how far do we let the monster get before we stand? It's that part. Well, they let the monster get to their gates. That monster is killing its people right now. That monster is trying to overthrow the government. They watch that monster rummage through the countryside, knocking over government after government after government after government. They are now the last government. All of these vestiges of the resistance, up in smoke. They didn't protect the resistance, so the resistance couldn't protect them. And now they're alone. By choice. By choice. Crenshaw, I appreciate you reporting. Keep up the great work. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I try. I do try. I do my damnedest. I could get hot at times, but I do try. Fatoma Fanta, if you sign up for Zale, they don't take a percentage. 0 fee is taken. YouTube takes 30%. This is a big difference. Cost over time, more good coffee. I don't know what Zelle is. I'll look it up. Z-E-L-L-E. I'll look it up. I don't know what it is. Wanda USA. I lost everything during the Obama administration, so I understand MAGA. H1B1 bore Democrats. I bore Republicans. They bombed Iraq for no reason. Oh, there was a reason. They wanted to take shit over to get the oil. Trump was hated by both parties, hence MAGA. That I agree. But, there's a continuity of U.S. policy through Democratic and Republican parties. It just is. So I feel you. I mean, a lot of people are going to feel betrayed. A lot of people were hoodwinked. When Obama let all of the housing go belly up in the black community was hit very hard during the Obama administration. H-1B1 visas, effectively saying Americans are too stupid to do the job, so they bring in indentured servants from across the globe. That Trump seems to be okay with, right? Those immigrants, get those people out. There will be consequences for this. God, man, everything in me hopes Iran is able to beat back the night on this. Everything in me hopes they're able to stand strong on this. I want them to kill their enemies. This hegemon shit needs to stop. Saul Williams lost his movie deal over Zionist Hollywood movie producer. He would be a good guest to get on the show. He is easier to get than most. I'm sure your audience will love it. Saul Williams. I will look him up. Fanta. One of those other guys lost his life. The one that made the movie on Gaza. All right, I'm going to end this. We have come to the end. I think I got all of them. Look, guys, I will end it on this. I am you ever seen a parent flip out on their kid? One time I was, this was God, man, I was in high school. And I went with friends of mine to go over their house to hang out. I gave my mom a heads up, but there was no way for her to know exactly where I was. And the part of town that I was in wasn't necessarily the best part of town in Richmond. And after I left their house, I end up, this was before cell phones. So I'm walking through the streets. I forget where I was trying to get to, but I go to an office, give the people a call, say, hey, I'm going to be in this area. Well, it wasn't specific enough for my mom to know exactly where I was. And hours pass. And apparently she's driving around looking for a kid for hours. And when she finally finds her kid, she flips out. She flips out. Now, she's not flipping out because she hates her kid. She's flipping out because she loves her kid. And there's a certain amount of angst that's built into the idea of, I don't know where my kid is. You're in a horrible fucking neighborhood. What are you doing? I feel that way towards Iran, even though they're not my kid. It's looking at it, thinking with a huge amount of angst, thinking like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? It is a dangerous world. This is not the moment for you to go it alone. There are other people who are also targets, where you are working better together than you are as individuals. They have no compunction with working in tandem in NATO and these other, the 14% of the white world that has decided that they need to do any and everything in their power to destroy anything that they need to in order to maintain control. They're fine with it. They're in agreement. Why do you want to face that alone? Without nukes, no less. All right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. Oh, wait, right here. Wandy, USA, Trump's first administration, I adored him. I do not know why you adored him. I'm not even going to get into that. I was getting $350 a month, supplemental, Medicare, Medicaid, paid my Medicaid, Biden cut everything. I'm sorry, Wandy, no. The Trump administration is cutting $1 trillion nearly off of Medicaid. Full stop. Trump gave you one check, but if you put in a Republican, they're going to do Republican things. That tax cut, that grotesque tax cut that Donald Trump passed. And by the way, they're about to do it again. And the amount that you're going to pay is going to go up because not only has the dollar itself been diminished, the amount that you're paying because of tariffs is going to go up. And he is going to use that money to give himself a massive tax cut. So the deficit is going to balloon to absurd amounts. Donald Trump and his rich cronies are going to do great, whereas Medicaid and the services are going to be cut. They are destroying Medicare. Elon Musk was destroying Medicare. If you needed to get onto Medicare, the amount of time it takes would have been further into the future as a result of what they were doing. Don't give me the shit about Trump being great. He was always horrible. He was always horrible. All right, I'm going to end this. Right here. We are naive and scared of things we don't understand. It's human nature. I don't know the context for that. Yes, but I don't know the context for that in this political discussion. Look, like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. We are almost at 63,000. We have, been a rocket. Obviously, I would like that to be faster. I think some of my coverage has been fucking fantastic, especially on the issues of war. Even though these videos always get demonetized because we're talking about war, that doesn't mean the coverage is not good. Over the weekend, I did several videos. I think my analysis is some of the best on this that people will find it's honest. It tends to be accurate. I listen to various sectors to get a certain take to figure out what I agree with, what I disagree with, and I put my own spin on it, especially with a certain amount of chess logic to it. And with a historical context that I think we're still living through that helps indicate what's occurring and what's going on. I thought my monologue this morning was actually good and accurate. I think I agree with Brian Beletic and Mark on this in the way that this is unfolding. Not because I read policy documents, but because you can see it unfold in regards to the continuity of policy going from one president to the next. And you can listen to what Donald Trump is saying, where it was making no fucking sense if he was actually trying to get a deal. So this channel has been accurate, and this channel has been right all the way through it. And no, we don't necessarily have the scale of some of the other bigger channels, but again, my preference is to be right. Part of the reason I like chess so much, or the very least playing blitz or ratings, it's an objective measurement of how well you're doing. I consider growth in a channel to be something similar, even though I don't have control over the apparatus. Either way, hit the like button, share this video, especially when I cut these videos. Don't watch something you don't want to watch. But if you enjoy it and you want to see it, God bless. Thank you for helping me cover this, because like I said, they demonetize these videos all the time. It doesn't stop me from doing them because, if I'm being honest, war focuses the mind. When the Ukraine war started, I thought my takes on it were actually pretty decent. I'm horrified by this. Any condemnation that's coming out of me towards Iran is because I'm horrified by what's happening. It's not coming out of a negative place. I want them to destroy their enemies. Full stop. That's what I want. This hegemonic shit needs to stop. It does nothing for us as a country. It is to our detriment as a country. I'll end it at that. All right. I'm going to say Wandy, Jamal 2014, 2017, 2024, I was getting supplement. You were getting it. Fair enough. I'm just pointing out to you that in general, Republicans don't believe in that stuff. Democrats only modestly believe in it, but Republicans definitely don't believe in it. And at first opportunity, when they think they got a power to get rid of it, they will, which is why they're taking $1 trillion out of Medicaid right now, which is why they were destroying Social Security during this administration. They believed that they had the power to do it, so they did it. So we will all be diminished as a result of it. And it's not like Democrats are going to put it back in, right? But we have all of the money to give the empire. We have billions to give to Israel. They have universal health care. I've been to Israel. I've gotten medication in Israel. It is cheaper than what you get in America, even without insurance. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for your support. All of you, we're growing. We are still over 1,000. We hit nearly 2,000 today in regards to viewership. We're growing. When I first started this, we were at 200. It's slow. But consistency. All the good stuff. You all have a good one. I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Be safe. Be kind. Yeah, be safe and be kind. Have a good one all.